They say a king dies twice. Once when his heart stops, once when his people forget his name. But what happens when neither death comes? When the alpha who ruled an empire gets thrown into a river by the woman who swore to stand beside him forever? When betrayal doesn't just take your crown, it takes your goddamn reason for breathing. This is that story. The one where power means nothing and survival means everything. Stick around till the end. You're going to want to see how far a man can fall before he learns to crawl back up. Drop a like and comment your city below, so I know my pack is watching. The rain came down like iron nails that night. Kaelor Draven stood in the doorway of his private chambers, boots still caked with border mud, the stink of 3 weeks campaigning clinging to his leathers. He'd ridden through 2 days of storm to get home early, pushed his guard to the breaking point because he wanted to see her face when he walked through that door. Seraphine, his Luna, the woman he'd crowned before gods and armies. The door opened without a sound. Expensive hinges, the kind that cost more than most families earned in a year. He stepped inside, and his world ended. She stood by the window in a silk robe the color of midnight, her dark hair loose over bare shoulders. Nothing unusual about that. He'd seen her like this 1,000 times. Except tonight, she wasn't alone. Lord Malrek Thorn leaned against the stone wall beside her, still buttoning his shirt. The king's war minister. The man Kaelor trusted with battle plans and border treaties. The bastard whose counsel had saved provinces. Their scents mixed in the air, heavy, unmistakable. Time stopped. Kaelor's hand went to the sword that wasn't there. He'd left it with his guard captain downstairs, too damn eager to see his wife to bother with weapons. Seraphine turned slowly. Her face showed no surprise, no fear, just a kind of cold assessment, like she was measuring furniture. "You're early," she said. "Not my love, not my king, just a statement of fact." Malrek straightened. His hand drifted toward the dagger at his belt, then stopped. Even a fool knew better than to draw steel on an alpha in his own house. Kaelor's voice came out quiet, dangerous. "Get out!" Malrek glanced at Seraphine. She gave the smallest shake of her head. That tiny gesture cut deeper than any blade. "No," Malrek said. "I don't think I will." The Alpha King's rage hit the room like a physical thing. The air itself seemed to compress. Shadows deepened. Every predator instinct Kaelor possessed screamed for blood. He took one step forward. The side door burst open. 6 men poured through. Not his guards. Soldiers wearing Malrek's colors under their cloaks. Silver-coated blades caught lamplight as they formed a half-circle. Kaelor's combat mind kicked in. Counted exits. Measured distances. Calculated odds. All bad. "I gave you everything," he said, still watching Seraphine. "The crown, the title, my goddamn heart." She smiled. Actually smiled. "You gave me a leash with jewels on it." "I gave you an empire." "You gave me your empire, your wars, your glory." Her eyes were ice. "I wanted my own." Kaelor lunged. Not at the soldiers. At her. Because even drowning in betrayal, some part of him still couldn't believe this was real. He made it 3 steps before the first blade found his ribs. Silver burns different than steel. It doesn't just cut. It poisons, slows the blood, turns muscle weak. They'd planned this. Planned it down to the minute. Kaelor crashed into a table, scattering wine cups. His hand caught one soldier's throat, crushed windpipe before 2 more blades punched through his shoulder. He was the strongest man in the kingdom, but strength has limits when you're unarmed, outnumbered, and bleeding silver into your veins. They beat him down like a dog. Every hit calculated, every strike designed to hurt without killing. Malrek stood over him eventually, breathing hard. "You should have died at the border," the war minister said. "That ambush 3 months ago, I set that up. But you survived. You always goddamn survive." Kaelor spat blood. "Then finish it." "No." Seraphine's voice. She knelt beside him, silk pooling around her knees. "You ruled with your heart, Kaelor. That was always your weakness." She leaned close. Her perfume the same one he'd bought her from Eastern markets. Empires belonged to those willing to cut theirs out. They dragged him through the palace while rain hammered the stones. The same halls where he'd walked as a boy, where his father had taught him what it meant to carry a kingdom on your shoulders. Every tapestry, every banner, all of it soaked in his family's blood and sacrifice. None of it mattered now. His own guards stood aside as they hauled him past. Some looked away. Others watched with hollow eyes. They'd been told something, promised something, or threatened with enough to make loyalty expensive. This is what men learn when kingdoms fall. Loyalty is just a transaction that hasn't been renegotiated yet. They threw him in a wagon. Chains wrapped his wrists, silver forged, the kind used for mad alphas who couldn't be controlled any other way. The ride to Blackwater Gorge took 2 hours. He spent every minute trying to heal. Silver poisoning fought him. His body wanted to knit broken ribs, seal torn muscle. The metal wouldn't let it, like trying to swim in honey. Rain pounded the wagon canvas. Thunder rolled across black sky. When they finally stopped, rough hands yanked him into the storm. Blackwater Gorge cut through the mountains like a scar. The river below ran fast and mean, swollen with spring melt. They'd executed traitors here for 3 generations, tossed them into water that crushed bodies against rocks before drowning whatever survived the fall. Kaelor stood at the edge, chains heavy on his wrists. 50 feet of nothing between him and dark water. Malrek approached with a cloak pulled against the rain. "Any last words, Your Majesty?" Kaelor looked at him. Really looked, saw the hunger there, the desperate need to matter, to be remembered as something other than the man who stood in shadows. "You'll destroy everything I built," Kaelor said. "I'll build my own." "With what? Her love?" Kaelor laughed, tasted blood. "She doesn't love you, Malrek. She can't love anyone. That's what makes her perfect for this." Doubt flickered across the war minister's face. Then Seraphine stepped forward. She changed into traveling clothes. Practical. Already moving on. "You were a good king," she said. "Strong, fair, honorable." She touched his face, fingers cold against his cheek. "And that's exactly why you had to die." She kissed him, soft, almost gentle, the way she used to when they were young and stupid and believed in forever. Then she shoved him backward into nothing. The fall felt like flying. Wind screamed past his ears, rain stung his face. The world turned end over end. He hit the water like hitting stone. Cold punched every thought from his skull. The current grabbed him, spun him, smashed him into rocks that broke bones he'd already broken. His lungs burned. The chains dragged him down. Somewhere above, the empire he'd bled for continued without him. And Kaelor Draven, the Alpha King who'd never lost a battle, who'd united warring clans and brought peace through strength and wisdom, who'd loved a woman more than his own life. That man drowned in the dark. 17 miles downstream, the River Aster ran quieter. The mountains gentled into cedar forests. Farms dotted the banks. People lived here who'd never seen the capital, who knew the king's name only from tax collectors and the occasional royal proclamation. Alira Solon stood knee-deep in cold water, checking fish traps by moonlight. The storm had passed an hour ago. Now just wind and the sound of current against rocks. She was reaching for the second trap when something massive bumped against her leg. Not a log. Logs didn't have arms. She jumped back, heart hammering, then leaned closer. A man. Face down in the shallows, tangled in driftwood and debris. Dead, probably. She should leave him. Men who ended up in rivers usually deserved the drowning, and bodies meant questions. Questions meant soldiers. Soldiers meant trouble for a woman living alone. But Alira's mother had been a healer before sickness took her, had taught her daughter that mercy wasn't a choice you made when it was easy. It was what you did when every instinct screamed to run. She grabbed his shoulder, hauled with everything she had. Gods, he was heavy, muscle and bone and soaked leather that weighed like iron. She dragged him onto the bank, rolled him over, pressed her ear to his chest. Nothing. She slammed her fist down. Once. Twice. The way her mother had shown her. Water erupted from his mouth. He convulsed, coughing, sucking air in ragged gasps. Alive. Barely. Alira sat back on her heels, breathing hard, looking at what she'd just saved. He was huge. Taller than any man she'd ever seen. Scars covered his arms, his chest, his face. Fresh wounds leaked blood into rainwater. And his wrists. Silver chains. Her breath caught. Men in silver chains were either mad or criminal or both. She should put him back in the river. Instead, she looked at his face. Brutal. hard-edged, the kind of face that had seen too many fights and won most of them, but young, younger than the scars suggested, and something in the set of his jaw, even unconscious, spoke of a man who'd stood against the world and refused to kneel. She made her choice. "You better be worth this," she muttered, and started dragging him toward her cottage. 3 days passed in fever dreams and delirium. Kaelor thrashed on a bed too small for his frame, fighting battles that had already been lost. He called out names, shouted orders. Once he nearly broke Alira's wrist when she tried to change his bandages. She worked through it, stitched the worst wounds with thread meant for sewing clothes, forced medicine past clenched teeth, kept him alive through sheer stubborn determination. Her cottage sat alone on the riverbank. One room, stone fireplace, herb bundles hanging from the rafters. Everything she owned fit in a space smaller than the Alpha King's private bath. She knew nothing about him except the chains, those she'd broken the first night. Silver forged or not, metal yielded to a hammer and chisel if you hit it enough times. On the fourth morning, his eyes opened, clear, aware. He stared at the rough timber ceiling for a long moment, then turned his head. Alira sat in the room's only chair, mending a shirt. Morning light came through the window, turning her auburn hair copper. Their eyes met. "Where?" His voice came out rusted. He tried again. "Where am I?" 17 miles south of anywhere that matters," she said. "River Aster. My cottage." He processed that. Tried to sit up. Failed. "Easy," she said. "You've got 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung that's mostly healed, and enough other damage that you should be dead." "How long?" 4 days. He looked down at himself. Someone had cleaned him, bandaged his wounds, dressed him in clothes that definitely weren't his. The work was crude, but effective. "You did this?" Wasn't anyone else around? "Why?" She set down her mending. "Because you were drowning. And that was enough? Should it need to be more?" He studied her face, trying to read her, looking for the angle, the price, the hidden agenda. Found nothing but mild annoyance that he was still asking questions. "What's your name?" she asked. The lie came automatically. "Kael." Not entirely false, just his name stripped of the weight it carried. "Alira." "Where's the nearest town, Alira?" "Millbrook, 3 hours walk north. Why?" "No reason." She raised an eyebrow. "You're a terrible liar." "I've been told." "Those chains were silver forged, expensive, the kind used for—" "I know what they're used for." "So which are you, mad or criminal?" He almost laughed. "Maybe both." "Well, you're alive. That's a start." She stood, grabbed a bowl from the table. "Can you eat?" His stomach answered before he could, a sound like grinding stones. She brought him soup, thin broth with vegetables and something that might have been chicken. He ate like a man who hadn't seen food in a week. When he finished, she took the bowl back. "You can stay until you heal," she said. "Then you leave." "Just like that?" "Just like that." "You're not curious? Don't want to know what I did to earn those chains?" She looked at him with eyes the color of winter sky. "Everyone's running from something," she said. "Usually I don't find them half dead in my river, but the principle's the same." She moved to the door, then paused. "One rule, though. You hurt me. You try to steal from me. You bring trouble to my door, and I'll finish what the river started." The way she said it, calm and matter-of-fact, made him believe every word. "Understood." She nodded and walked out, leaving him alone with pain and thoughts that hurt worse than broken ribs. Recovery happened slower than rage wanted and faster than mercy deserved. By the end of the first week, Kaelor could walk without falling. By the second, he could work. And Alira worked him like a rented mule. "Firewood needs splitting," she said on the 8th day, tossing him an axe. He stared at it, at her. "I just recovered from lying in bed long enough? You eat my food, you sleep under my roof, you work." "I'm still healing." "Then heal while you work." No one had talked to him like that in 15 years. He split firewood. It felt good, honest. Every swing of the axe did what it promised. Wood broke or it didn't. No politics, no betrayal, just force and physics. Alira watched from the porch, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. "You've done this before," she said. "What?" Hard labor. You've got the hands for it. He looked down at his palms. Calluses over scars, over older calluses. The hands of a man who'd trained with weapons since childhood. Long time ago, he said. Before the chains? Before everything? She didn't push. That was her way. She'd ask one question, accept whatever answer came, then move on. It made him more nervous than interrogation would have. Days blurred together, blurred. He learned her routines. She woke before dawn, checked traps, gathered herbs, prepared medicines for people who lived in distant farms, worked until dark, never complained, never stopped. The cottage was simple, but not poor. Books lined one shelf, real books, expensive. Your mother's? He asked one evening. Alira looked up from the stew she was stirring. How'd you know? You mentioned she was a healer. Was. 3 years ago this winter. Something crossed her face. Old grief. The kind that never quite heals. Fever took half the valley. She saved 20 people before it took her. I'm sorry. So am I. She went back to stirring. But sorry doesn't bring anyone back. He wanted to tell her he understood, that he'd lost people too, that grief was a river you drowned in or learned to swim. Instead, he said nothing, because Kael the Drifter had no dead to mourn, and Kaelor Draven was supposed to be one of them. The first real crack in his carefully maintained lie came during a storm 2 weeks after he'd woken. Thunder rolled across the valley like artillery. Rain hammered the roof. Wind screamed through cedar trees. Alira sat by the fire, reading. Kaelor, still thinking of himself as Kael in her presence, stood at the window watching lightning tear holes in the sky. You're wound tighter than a crossbow, she said without looking up. Storms make me restless. Storms make everyone restless. You look like you're planning a siege. He turned. What? That look, that stance. She set down her book. You stand like a soldier. Move like one too. Talk like someone used to giving orders even when you're asking questions. You're imagining things. Am I? She stood, cross to him. You've got weapon calluses, battle scars that aren't from bar fights. And when you think I'm not watching, you count exits and measure sight lines like a man expecting an attack. His jaw tightened. Maybe I was a soldier. Maybe, but soldiers don't usually end up in silver chains. I told you. You told me nothing, which is fine. You don't owe me your history. She looked at him steadily. But don't insult my intelligence by pretending you're just some drifter who got unlucky. The firelight caught her face, determined, unafraid. This woman who'd pulled him from death, who'd worked herself ragged keeping him alive, who'd demanded nothing but honesty. And he'd given her lies. The shame of it hit harder than expected. You're right, he said quietly. About which part? All of it. She waited. I was a soldier, a commander. I led men into battles that shouldn't have been won. He looked away. I made enemies, powerful ones. They put me in chains and threw me in a river to make sure I'd stay dead. Not the whole truth, but closer than anything he'd said so far. And now? She asked. Now I'm here, because a stubborn woman with too much kindness decided corpses were worth saving. Corpses don't chop firewood. No, they don't. She studied him for a long moment. Are your enemies still looking? Probably. Will they come here? I don't know. Maybe. Then we should be ready. The simple practicality of it stunned him. No fear, no recrimination, just acceptance and preparation. You should tell me to leave, he said. Should I? Any smart person would. She smiled. I pulled you out of a river at midnight in a storm. If I was smart, you'd be fish food. Despite everything, he laughed. Real laughter, the kind that hurt his ribs but felt good anyway. Outside, lightning split the sky. Thunder followed like the world breaking open. And for the first time since Blackwater Gorge, Kaelor felt something besides rage and grief. Hope. Fragile. Dangerous. The kind that gets men killed when they lean on it too hard. But real. Winter came early that year. Snow blanketed the valley by the first week of the new season. The river froze along the edges. Animals holed up in dens and burrows. Life contracted to the space between the cottage and the wood line. Kaelor, still Kyle in this small pocket of the world, learned skills no king should know. How to smoke fish properly, which herbs treated fever versus infection, the exact angle to sharpen a blade meant for vegetables instead of throats. Alira taught him without realizing she was teaching, just lived her life and expected him to keep up. They developed routines. She'd cook, he'd clean, she'd gather, he'd preserve. Two people finding rhythm in survival, and slowly, carefully, something else grew. It started with looks that lasted too long, hands brushing while passing firewood. The way she'd laugh at something he said, and the sound would hit him like a punch to the chest. The way he'd watch her work and forget why he'd come to the window in the first place. One night, she came in from checking traps, shivering despite her furs. He'd built up the fire without thinking, had water already heating for tea. She stopped in the doorway. "You didn't have to do that. I was cold anyway." Liar. But she was smiling. She hung her furs, moved to the fire, let the heat sink into frozen fingers. Kaelor handed her tea. Their fingers touched. Neither pulled away. "Kael," she said quietly. "Yeah? Thank you. For tea?" "Staying." Something in his chest cracked. Because he'd stayed for the wrong reasons at first. Stayed because he was healing. Stayed because he had nowhere else to go. But now he stayed because leaving meant never seeing her face again, never hearing her laugh, never feeling this strange peace that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with being seen as just a man. "Thank you for letting me," he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Just that. Nothing more. But in that moment, Kaelor Draven understood something he'd never learned in 15 years of ruling an empire. A crown makes you important. Love makes you human. And he'd been important for so long he'd forgotten what human felt like. The hunters came on the first day of the year's longest night. 5 men. Professional. Armed with silver-edged steel and the kind of brutal efficiency that came from practice. Kaelor woke to the sound of breaking glass. Instinct moved him before thought. He rolled from the small cot where he'd been sleeping, came up with the skinning knife he'd taken to keeping close. Alira's bed was empty. Terror spiked through him. He moved to the main room, stayed low, counted shapes in the darkness. 3 inside, 2 circling outside. And Alira? There, cornered near the fireplace. One of the hunters had her by the arm. She'd cut him. Blood ran down his face from a wound across his cheek. "Good girl," Kaelor thought savagely. The hunter raised his hand to strike her. "Touch her, and I'll feed you your own spine." All 5 men turned. The one holding Alira's arm squinted into the shadows. "Well, damn," he said. "Target acquired." Target. They weren't here for supplies or robbery. They were here for him. The lead hunter stepped forward. Older. Scarred. The kind of man who'd seen 100 fights and walked away from all of them. "Kaelor Draven," he said. "The dead king. Lady Seraphine sends her regards." Alira's face went white. "Kaelor, that's not—" He started to deny it. Stopped, because lies had run their course. "Let her go," Kaelor said. "Your contract's with me." True. But the lady was specific. No witnesses. The hunter holding Alira drew a knife. Something broke inside Kaelor's chest. Not broke. Shattered. Every careful restraint he'd built. Every wall between the man he'd been and the man he was pretending to be. All of it went up like oil-soaked kindling. The Alpha King rose from the shadows. He hit the first hunter before the man could blink. Knife punched through the ribs, angled up, found the heart. The body dropped. Second hunter lunged. Kaelor caught his wrist, twisted until bones cracked, used the momentum to throw him through the window. Glass shattered. The man screamed once before he hit the frozen ground outside. Third hunter managed to draw steel, managed to swing. The blade cut across Kaelor's shoulder, pain sharp and clean and utterly meaningless. He broke the hunter's arm at the elbow, reversed the grip on his knife, drove it through the man's throat. Blood sprayed across cedar walls. The 2 outside rushed in. Professional killers who'd hunted dangerous prey their whole lives. They lasted 30 seconds. When it ended, Kaelor stood in the center of the cottage, covered in blood that wasn't his, breathing like a winded horse. 5 bodies. 5 dead, in less than 2 minutes. The Alpha King, still undefeated. He turned. Elira stared at him from beside the fireplace, eyes wide, face pale, not with fear of the dead men, with understanding of what he was. "Kaelor," she said again, testing the name, tasting it. "Elira, Kaelor Draven, the Alpha King." Her voice shook. "The one who died at Blackwater Gorge 3 months ago. Yes, you lied to me. Yes, about everything. Almost everything." She laughed, a wild sound. "Almost, gods, almost everything. I didn't know if I could trust. Her voice rose. "You talk about trust while sleeping in my home, eating my food, while I—" She stopped, bit down on whatever she was about to say. Kaelor took a step toward her. She raised a hand. "Don't." He stopped. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Right now. All of it." So he did. He told her about Seraphine, about Malrek, about the empire built through blood and sacrifice, about the throne room betrayal, and the chains, and the river that should have killed him. He told her everything except the one thing he couldn't name yet, the part where somewhere between chopping firewood and sharing tea and learning what her laugh sounded like, he'd fallen in love with her. When he finished, silence filled the cottage. Elira looked at the dead men, at the blood soaking into floorboards, at the window where winter wind poured through broken glass. "My home," she said quietly. "I know. My safe place. I'm sorry." "Sorry," she laughed again, bitter this time. "The king is sorry. The man who lied to me for months is sorry." "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to have been honest." The words exploded out of her. "I want to have saved a man named Kael who split firewood and made tea and didn't carry the weight of a murdered kingdom on his shoulders. I want—" Her voice broke. Tears streaked her face. Kaelor had survived battles and betrayal and drowning, but watching her cry hurt worse than all of it. "I want," she whispered, "to have been enough reason for you to trust me." "You were. You are." He moved closer. She didn't back away this time. "Elira, you're the only person in this world who saw me as just a man, not a king, not a weapon, just someone worth saving for no reason except it was the right thing to do. And now? Now I've destroyed that, like I destroy everything I touch." "No." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "They destroyed it. The ones who sent hunters to kill us both." "Us." The word hit like lightning. "This isn't your fight," he said. "The hell it's not. They broke my window." Despite everything, he almost smiled. "Elira, whatever you're about to say, save it." She straightened. "Are more coming?" "Probably. Can we run?" "For a while. Not forever." "Then what?" He looked at her. This woman who'd pulled him from death, who'd given him shelter and demanded nothing but honesty he'd been too broken to offer, and made the choice he'd been running from since the river. "Then I go back. To Vareth? To my empire, my people, to finish what they started. They threw you in a river. They threw away a king who ruled from distance." His voice hardened. "I won't make that mistake again." Elira studied his face, reading something there. "You'll die. Maybe. Probably. Yes. But you're going anyway." "Yes." "Why?" And finally, he gave her the truth. "Because you almost died tonight for the crime of showing me mercy. Because an empire I bled for is rotting under thieves and traitors. Because I spent 3 months learning how to be human again, and now I remember why being king mattered in the first place." He stepped closer. "And because if I don't go back, everyone I've ever failed will have died for nothing." She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. "When do we leave?" "We? You think I'm staying here? In this blood-soaked cottage, waiting for the next wave of hunters? Elira, this is war. Real war. Not what? Not something a simple healer's daughter can handle?" Fire lit her eyes. "I dragged your royal ass out of a river. I kept you breathing when you wanted to die. I just got attacked in my own home because I chose compassion over safety." She grabbed his collar. "So don't you dare tell me I can't come. Don't you dare protect me by leaving me behind. This close he could see the gold flecks in her winter sky eyes, could smell cedar smoke and herbs and fear being burned into fury. They'll try to kill you, he said. They already did. I'm still here. Elira? She kissed him, hard, desperate, the kiss of someone who'd been holding back and couldn't anymore. When she pulled away, her voice was steady. I know what you are now, the whole truth, and I'm choosing to stand beside you anyway. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, Kaelor Draven felt something he hadn't felt since before the chains, purpose. Then we leave at dawn, he said, and we don't stop until we take back everything they stole. She smiled, fierce and bright and utterly unafraid. Good. They spent the rest of the night preparing, packing what little they owned, burning the bodies, erasing signs of the fight. As false dawn painted the eastern sky, they stood outside the cottage that had been home. Elira looked back once. I'll rebuild it, Kaelor said. When this is over, she said, I want a bigger fireplace. He laughed. They turned north together, toward the capital, toward war, toward a reckoning that would baptize an empire in blood or bury it forever. But before they could take the first step, a voice called from the tree line. Well, damn, the river really didn't finish you. Kaelor spun. A figure emerged from the cedars, tall, scarred, moving with the easy grace of a born killer, and wearing the black and silver of Vareth's royal guard. Captain Torrin Vale stepped into the clearing, hand resting on his sword. Hello, Your Majesty, he said. We need to talk. Captain Torrin Vale stood 15 feet away with his hand resting on his sword, like a man who'd learned long ago that relaxation got you killed. Kaelor's body went combat-ready without conscious thought. Weight shifted, muscles coiled, every instinct screaming threat. Elira moved beside him, close enough to feel her tension. Easy, Torrin said. If I wanted you dead, you'd be bleeding already. Then what do you want? Same thing I've wanted since Blackwater Gorge. The captain's scarred face showed nothing. To serve my king. Silence stretched like a blade being drawn. Your king drowned, Kaelor said carefully. Did he? Torrin took one step forward, slow, deliberate. Because I'm looking at him right now. You're looking at a dead man walking. Good. Dead men don't have anything left to lose. Kaelor studied him. Torrin Vale had served the crown for 20 years, had fought beside Kaelor's father, had trained Kaelor himself in sword work when he was barely old enough to lift a blade. If anyone in Vareth could be trusted, but trust was what got him thrown in a river. Why are you here? Kaelor asked. Followed the hunters. They weren't subtle. Torrin's gaze flicked to the cottage. I see they didn't fare well. They tried to kill us. Of course they did. Seraphine's been sending teams out for weeks, covering ground, making sure you stayed dead. How'd you know I wasn't? Because I was standing on that gorge edge the night they threw you over. Something dark crossed Torrin's face. Watched you fall. Watched them celebrate, and knew in my gut you'd survive. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Call it instinct. Call it faith. Call it whatever the hell you want. Torrin stepped closer. But I've been looking for you since the day they crowned that murdering bitch. Elira spoke for the first time. If you knew he was alive, why didn't you help sooner? Torrin looked at her, really looked. Assessment without judgment. Because I'm one man, and Vareth's crawling with Malrek's loyalists. His attention went back to Kaelor. I couldn't make a move until I found you, until I knew you were ready. Ready for what? To take back what's yours. The words hung in cold morning air. Kaelor wanted to believe him. Every part of him screamed to accept this as real, as salvation, but belief was expensive, and he'd already paid that price. Prove it, Kaelor said. Prove what? That you're not here to finish what the river started. Torrin smiled. Grim. You want proof? I'll give you proof. He reached into his coat. Kaelor's hand went to his knife. But what Torrin pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a signet ring, heavy gold, wolf's head crest. Kaelor's breath stopped. His father's ring. The one passed down through 7 generations of Draven kings. The one Kaelor had given to Torrin the night before his wedding to Seraphine. Keep this safe, he'd said, in case something happens to me. You kept it, Kaelor said quietly, for 3 years, waiting for the day I could give it back. Torrin held it out. Take it. Be who you were meant to be. This is where men make their choices, not in grand halls with armies watching, but in frozen clearings at dawn with nothing but instinct and the weight of what comes next. Kaelor took the ring, slid it onto his finger. It fit like it had never left. What's the situation in Vareth? He asked. And just like that, the dead king became the living commander. Torrin's posture shifted, not quite standing at attention, but close. Bad. Malrek's consolidated power. Executed or exiled anyone loyal to you. The royal guard split, half serving him out of fear, half waiting for someone to rally behind. The people? Angry, scared, taxes have doubled, trades collapsing. Border clans are raiding again because Malrek's too busy securing power to defend the frontier. And Seraphine? Torrin's jaw tightened. She plays the grieving widow, sits beside Malrek wearing your father's crown, signs proclamations in your name like she has any right to it. Rage flickered hot in Kaelor's chest. He pushed it down. Rage was useful in battle, useless in planning. How many can we count on? He asked. In the city? Maybe 200 guard, another 300 militia if we're lucky. Against? Malrek commands 5,000 regular troops, plus whatever mercenaries he's bought. Illyra made a sound. Those are terrible odds. They are, Torrin agreed, which is why we don't fight them straight up. Kaelor looked at him. What are you thinking? The border clans, the ones Malrek's ignoring, they owe you blood debts from the unification wars. You saved their territory, gave them autonomy. They'll remember. That was 15 years ago. Clan memory runs long. Torrin's eyes gleamed. And they hate Malrek. He's been sending collectors to demand tribute they never owed under your rule. The pieces started falling into place. Border clans meant warriors. Fierce, loyal. 3,000 minimum if they all answered. Combined with loyalists inside Vareth. Still outnumbered, but not hopeless. How long to reach the clans? Kaelor asked. 2 weeks if we push hard. Another week to gather forces. 3 weeks, Kaelor calculated. Malrek will know we're coming halfway through. Let him know. Let him scramble. Scared leaders make mistakes. And if he doesn't make mistakes? Torrin smiled, sharp. Then we make them for him. This is the alchemy of war, taking fear and turning it into fuel. Men who've lost everything fight differently than men protecting something. They fight without hesitation, without mercy. Because what else is there to lose? Illyra touched Kaelor's arm. Can we trust him? Fair question, necessary question. Kaelor met Torrin's eyes. Can we? I've bled for your family, buried friends defending your father, watched you grow from a boy into the best King Vareth's seen in a century. Torrin's voice roughened. And I stood on that gorge watching them murder you while I did nothing. You couldn't have stopped them. Doesn't matter, I should have died trying. He straightened. So yes, you can trust me, because I owe you a debt that won't be paid until we take back that throne, or I'm buried trying. Silence. Then Kaelor nodded. All right, we ride for the border clans. When? Now. Torrin grinned. Thought you'd never ask. They moved north through forests that gave way to foothills that climbed toward mountains. 3 people. Minimal supplies. Traveling fast and quiet. Torrin knew the routes, old game trails and forgotten roads that kept them away from settlements. Kaelor's body remembered this. The constant movement. The vigilance. The way you slept light and woke ready. But something had changed. Before, war had been duty. Now it was personal. Every mile brought him closer to the empire he'd lost, to the people he'd failed, to the woman who'd betrayed him and the bastard who'd helped her do it. And every mile, Illyra walked beside him. She didn't complain, didn't slow them down, just kept pace with grim determination. On the 3rd night, camped in a canyon where wind carved strange sounds from stone, Torrin took first watch. Kaelor sat near the small fire, cleaning weapons he'd taken from the dead hunters. Illyra settled beside him. You're quiet, she said. Thinking. About? What comes next? War comes next. After that, she looked at him. Firelight turned her eyes gold. You're already planning after the war? Have to. Victory without a plan becomes chaos. He set down the blade he'd been sharpening. I can't just kill Malrek and Seraphine and expect everything to fix itself. Can't you? That's how tyrants think. Clean slate. Start over. He shook his head. But people don't work that way. They need continuity. Need to believe the future's connected to the past. So what do? Rebuild trust. Show them I learned from what happened. Prove I'm not the king who got thrown in a river. You weren't that king. I was distant, focused on conquest and borders while ignoring what was rotting at the center. His hands curled into fists. I loved Seraphine, trusted Malrek, never saw what they were building because I was too busy looking outward. This is the lesson every leader learns too late. Power doesn't corrupt. Distance does. When you stop seeing people as people and start seeing them as pieces on a board, that's when you lose. That's when someone closer to the ground notices the cracks first and uses them to bring you down. You're different now, Illyra said. Am I? You chopped firewood for 2 months, made tea, learned what it felt like to be normal. I was hiding. You were healing. She touched his hand. There's a difference. He turned his palm up, their fingers interlaced. When this is over, he said, I'm going to build you that cottage. Bigger fireplace, room for books, garden space. When this is over, you'll be king. You won't have time for cottages. I'll make time. She smiled, sad. You can't promise that. Watch me. Kaelor, I know what I'm asking. I know you didn't sign up to be a queen or a Luna or whatever the hell they'd call you. He squeezed her hand. But I need you to know something. What? You saved my life, not just from the river, from becoming the kind of man who uses people without seeing them. His voice dropped. Don't leave when this gets hard. Please. Illyra looked at him for a long moment, then leaned in and kissed him, soft, sure. When she pulled back, her voice was steady. I'm not leaving, but you need to understand something too. What's that? I don't want a cottage as payment for standing beside you. I want a king who remembers what firewood feels like. Her eyes held his. Stay human, even when the crown tries to make you something else. I will. Promise. I promise. Across the fire, Torrin pretended not to watch, but Kaelor caught the slight smile, the approval. And for the first time since this started, he felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The border clans lived in the Steel Ridge Mountains where civilization gave up trying. Stone settlements built into cliff faces, communities that had survived 1,000 years through stubbornness and steel. They'd fought Kaelor's grandfather, negotiated with his father, and finally sworn loyalty to Kaelor himself after the Unification Wars. But clan loyalty was complex, built on honor and blood and keeping your word. Break it once, and you were dead to them forever. The first settlement they reached was Ironhold, built into a mountain flank. Population maybe 300. Warriors who could fight in terrain that broke regular armies. Torrin led them to the main hall just after sunset. It was carved from living rock. Torches burned in iron sconces. The air smelled of smoke and old stone and the kind of history you couldn't fake. Chief Aldrich Ironborn waited on a carved chair that wasn't quite a throne. He was massive, gray-bearded, scarred, the kind of man who'd earned respect through decades of not dying. His eyes locked onto Kaelor the moment they entered. Well, damn, Aldrich said. The dead walk. Kaelor stopped 10 feet away. Hello, Aldrich. Kaelor Draven, or should I call you Ghost? King will do. King, Aldrich laughed, rough. Last I heard you drowned. Vareth mourned. Your Luna took power beside that snake Malrek. She's not my Luna. No? You crowned her. I did. That was a mistake. Expensive mistake. Aldrich leaned forward. So why are you here? Come to hide among the clans? Looking for sanctuary? I'm looking for an army. Silence dropped like a hammer. Every warrior in the hall stopped moving. Conversations died. All eyes turned toward the center. Aldrich's expression didn't change. You've got balls, I'll give you that. I've got a blood debt. You owe me one. Do we? The Unification Wars. Malrek wanted to burn Ironhold, scatter your people. I stopped him. That was 15 years ago. Clan memory runs long. That's what you taught me, Aldrich smiled. Using my own words. Should I use someone else's? Careful, boy. You're not king here. I'm not a boy either. They stared at each other. This was the dance. Power testing power, neither willing to blink first. Finally, Aldrich stood, walked down from his chair, stopped directly in front of Kaelor. They were the same height, eye to eye. What happened? Aldrich asked quietly. So Kaelor told him. Everything. The betrayal. The river. The cottage. The hunters. Every word stripped of pride or justification. Just the truth. When he finished, Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. You loved her, he said. Yes. And she destroyed you for it. Yes. What do you want from us? Warriors. 3,000 if you can muster them. Half that if you can't. To do what? Take back Vareth. Remove Malrek. Restore order. And the woman who betrayed you? Kaelor's jaw tightened. Exile. Public judgment. Let the world see what she is. Not execution. No. Why not? Because killing her would be easy. Because revenge and justice weren't the same thing. Because somewhere under all the rage and hurt, part of him still remembered loving her. And that part deserved to die cleanly instead of being fed on hatred. But he didn't say any of that. Instead, because I'm not her. Aldrich studied him, looking for something. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him. The clans will answer, he said. But not for you. Kaelor's stomach dropped. Then who? For her. Aldrich pointed at Elira. She straightened, surprised. What? She said. You pulled him from a river, kept him alive when he should have died. Aldrich smiled. That takes courage, the kind we respect here. I'm not a warrior. Neither was my grandmother, but she held Ironhold for 40 years after my grandfather died. He looked back at Kaelor. You want our warriors? She marches with you, visible, where we can see her. Why? Kaelor asked. Because she's proof you're more than just a king wanting his throne back. She's proof you learned something from drowning. This is the thing about power. Men will follow strength, but they'll die for someone who represents what strength should protect. Kaelor looked at Elira. You don't have to. I'll do it, she said. Elira, I said I'll do it, her voice firm. If that's what it takes to get an army, then that's what happens. Aldrich grinned. I like her. So do I, Kaelor said quietly. Good. Then we have an accord. Aldrich extended his arm. Kaelor gripped it, forearm to forearm, the way warriors sealed oaths. How long to gather the clans? Kaelor asked. 1 week, maybe less if the runners move fast. And then? Then we march on Vareth and remind that bastard Malrek what happens when you break faith with the border clans. The week passed in controlled chaos. Runners went out to every settlement. Ironhold, Stonewatch, Blackpeak, Wolfton. A dozen more scattered through the mountains. Each one answered the call. Warriors arrived in groups, 50 here, 100 there. All of them hard, all of them ready. By the end of the week, 3,000 fighters crowded the valley below Ironhold. Not an army in the traditional sense, no uniform armor, no standardized weapons, but they moved like wolves, coordinated, lethal. Kaelor spent every waking hour with them, learning their names, their stories, what they'd lost under Malrek's rule. He didn't stand on ceremony, didn't demand respect, just worked beside them, ate with them, listened. And slowly they stopped seeing a dead king, started seeing a man worth following. Elira did the same. She moved through the camps tending injuries, offering medicine, talking to warriors like they were people instead of weapons. Kaelor watched her one evening as she bandaged a young fighter's hand. The kid couldn't have been more than 17, scared, trying not to show it. Elira talked to him about home, about his family, about what he'd do when this was over. By the time she finished, he was smiling. That's leadership too, not just commanding, connecting. Torin appeared beside Kaelor. She's good at this. She is. You planning to make it official? Official? Don't play stupid, you know what I mean. Kaelor looked at him. I haven't even survived the war yet. All the more reason, give people something to believe in beyond vengeance. She's not a symbol. Everyone's a symbol when you're trying to take back a kingdom. Torrin's voice softened. But that's not why you should do it. Then why? Because you love her. And men who forget how to love turn into the kind of rulers we're fighting against. The words hit harder than expected. Kaelor had spent 15 years being a king, being strong, being certain, and it had made him blind. But these months with Illyra had taught him something. Strength without love becomes tyranny. Power without connection becomes isolation. And isolation is how good men turn into monsters. When this is over, Kaelor said, I'll ask her properly. Torrin smiled. When this is over, you'll be too busy rebuilding an empire. Then I'll make time. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. They stood in silence watching Illyra work. Finally, Torrin spoke. Tomorrow we march. I know. You ready? Kaelor looked at the army gathering below, at the warriors who'd answered a call from a king they thought was dead, at the woman who'd saved him when he had nothing. No, he said honestly, but I'm done running. Good enough. The march south took 10 days, 3,000 clan warriors moving through mountain passes into the lowlands. Word spread ahead of them. Villages saw them coming. Some cheered, others hid. But everyone knew what it meant. The dead king was returning, and he was bringing war with him. Malrek's response came on the 8th day. A rider under Peace Banner intercepted them 5 miles from Vareth's outer walls. Kaelor received him on horseback surrounded by clan chiefs. The messenger was young, scared, trying not to show it. Lord Regent Malrek offers terms, he said. I'm listening. Turn back now. Disperse your forces. Accept exile. The messenger swallowed. In return, he grants you your life and safe passage to the eastern borders. Silence. Then Kaelor started laughing. Not humor. Something colder. He offers me my life, Kaelor said. How generous. Tell me, boy, does Malrek think I'm stupid? I'm just delivering the message, my lord. King. The word is king. Yes, your majesty. Kaelor leaned forward in his saddle. You go back to Malrek. You tell him this. I didn't survive drowning to run away scared. I didn't walk through fire to accept exile from a traitor wearing my father's crown. His voice carried across the assembled warriors. Tell him I'm coming for my throne, for my empire, for everyone he's hurt trying to play at being king. Kaelor's eyes were ice. And tell him when I get there, I'll give him the same mercy he showed me. The messenger's face went white. And what mercy is that, your majesty? None. The boy fled. Aldrich rode up beside Kaelor. Well, that's diplomacy done with. Wasn't much to begin with. What now? Kaelor looked toward Vareth, toward the black towers rising against gray sky, toward the empire he'd built and lost and would die trying to reclaim. Now we finish this. The assault began at dawn 3 days later. Vareth stood behind walls that had never fallen. Black stone, 30 feet high. Gates forged from steel that had turned back armies for 200 years. Malrek had 5,000 troops. Siege weapons. Supplies for months. Every tactical advantage. Except one. He was defending. And defenders can't win by staying inside walls. Kaelor didn't attack the gates. He attacked the people. Torrin led teams into the city through old smuggler tunnels, routes that Kaelor himself had used as a boy exploring the capital. They moved through the lower districts spreading word. The king lives, the king returns, the king remembers those who stayed loyal. Riots broke out in 3 districts by midday. Malrek's troops responded with force, which turned protests into rage. By sunset, half the city was burning. That's when Kaelor hit the walls. Clan warriors with climbing equipment, grapples and ropes. Crude but effective. They didn't try to hold territory, just created chaos, made Malrek split his forces, spread defenders too thin. On the 3rd day, the eastern gate fell. Not from outside, from inside. Loyalist Guard turned on Malrek's mercenaries, opened the gates while clan warriors poured through. The battle for Vareth became street fighting, brutal, personal, house to house. Kaelor led from the front, not because he wanted glory, because his people needed to see him, needed to know this was real, that their king had returned. He fought like a man possessed, blade singing through armor, voice cutting through chaos to rally warriors around him. Alira stayed close, not fighting, but healing, pulling wounded back from front lines, saving lives even while death raged around her. And slowly, block by block, they pushed toward the palace, toward the black towers where Malrek waited, toward the throne room where this had all begun. The palace gates broke on the 5th day. Kaelor stood in the courtyard where he'd trained as a boy, where his father had taught him sword work and strategy and the weight of leadership. Bodies littered the ground, smoke rose from burning buildings, blood ran between ancient stones. This was the cost. The price of power reclaimed through force. And Kaelor felt every death like a wound. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because stopping now meant all of it. Every death, every sacrifice, every moment of pain would be for nothing. He led warriors into the palace, through halls hung with tapestries showing Draven victories, past the throne room where his father had ruled, upstairs toward the royal chambers, toward the room where Seraphine had stood beside Malrek and ended Kaelor's world. They found resistance on the upper levels, Malrek's personal guard, elite fighters, men who'd been paid enough to die protecting a traitor. The battle crashed through marble halls. Steel rang, men screamed, blood-painted walls that had stood for centuries. Kaelor cut through them like wheat, not with rage, with focus. Every strike necessary, every kill efficient. This was what he'd been born for, what he'd trained his whole life to do. Until finally, the path cleared, and before him stood the doors to the throne room, the same doors he'd walked through 1,000 times, the same room where he'd been crowned, where he'd married Seraphine, where his life as king had begun and ended. Torrhen stopped beside him, breathing hard, bloodied but alive. "Ready?" the captain asked. Kaelor looked at Elira. She'd stayed with them through everything, pale, exhausted, but her eyes were steady. "Stay here," he said to her. "No." "Elira, I didn't come this far to wait outside." Her voice was iron. "Whatever happens in there, I'm with you." He wanted to argue, wanted to protect her from what came next, but she'd earned this, earned the right to see how her choice to save a dying man ended. "All right," he said. "Together." He pushed open the doors. The throne room hadn't changed. High ceiling, stained glass windows. The throne itself carved from black stone sitting on a raised platform, and standing before it, Malrek and Seraphine. She wore the crown, his father's crown, silver and sapphires that caught light from burning torches. She was beautiful, had always been beautiful. That hadn't changed. What had changed was Kaelor. He looked at her now and felt nothing. No love, no hatred, not even the rage that had sustained him through months of planning. Just cold assessment. This was the woman who'd betrayed him, who'd shoved him into a river, who'd tried to erase him from history, and she'd failed. Malrek stepped forward. "So, the river didn't take?" "No," Kaelor said. "It didn't." "Should have made sure you were dead before celebrating." "Probably. But that's always been your weakness, Malrek. You plan well, execute poorly." The war minister's face darkened. "I took your empire." "You stole it. There's a difference." Kaelor moved further into the room, Torrhen and Elira flanking him. "Stealing is easy. Keeping is hard. I've kept it for 3 months." "And in 3 months you've undone 15 years of peace, turned prosperity into poverty, made enemies of allies." Kaelor's voice was ice. "You didn't take an empire? You took a corpse. And you're so busy playing king you don't even smell the rot." Malrek drew his sword. "Finally," he said, "words are done." "They are." Kaelor drew his own blade, the sword Torrhen had brought him, his father's sword, the one he'd carried through 100 battles. It felt like coming home. They circled each other, 2 men, 1 throne, the oldest story in the world. "You were weak," Malrek said, "soft, too busy being loved to be feared." "And you're too busy being feared to be loved," Kaelor replied. "That's why you'll lose." "I'm winning." You're surviving. There's a difference. Malrek attacked. Fast. Skilled. Years of training behind every strike. But Kaelor was faster. He'd spent 3 months chopping wood and hauling water and remembering what it felt like to be human. And that humanity had sharpened his edge instead of dulling it. Their blades met in a shower of sparks. They fought across the throne room floor, between pillars, over bodies of dead guards. Every strike testing, probing, looking for weakness. Malrek was good, had always been good. But Kaelor was better, because Malrek fought to win. Kaelor fought because losing meant everyone he loved died. And that's a different kind of desperation. He drove Malrek back, step by step, toward the throne. Their swords locked, face to face, close enough to see the fear in Malrek's eyes. You survived because she saved you, Malrek hissed, gaze flicking toward Elira. You came back because you became weak. Kaelor smiled, cold, sure. No, he said quietly. I survived because strength without love becomes tyranny. He broke the lock, spun. Blade cut through Malrek's guard, buried itself in the war minister's chest. Malrek staggered, blood spreading across expensive silks. He looked down, looked up. You... He fell, dead before he hit the ground. Silence, just the sound of breathing and distant battle outside. Kaelor turned. Seraphine stood by the throne, watching, crown still on her head. She showed no fear, no surprise, just that same cold assessment she'd shown the night she'd destroyed him. Well fought, she said. Don't what? Act like this is just another game. He walked toward her, blade still bloody. It's over, Seraphine. Is it? She smiled. You won your throne back. Congratulations. What now? Now you answer for what you did. And what did I do? Betray a king who was already betraying himself? She laughed. You were so busy being strong and noble and fair that you forgot what power actually requires. Which is ruthlessness. The willingness to cut out everything that makes you weak. Her eyes went to Elira. Even love. Love isn't weakness. Then why did it almost destroy you? Because I loved the wrong person. That landed. Something flickered across Seraphine's face, hurt, maybe, or just annoyance at being discarded. So what happens now? She asked. You execute me? Throw me in a river like I did to you? Kaelor looked at her for a long moment. This woman he'd crowned, loved, built a life beside. This stranger who'd destroyed everything for power she couldn't even hold. No river, he said finally. No shadows. No quick death. Then what? Exile. Public. Where everyone can see what you are. And what am I? A lesson. He reached up, removed the crown from her head. She didn't resist, just watched as he held it. His father's crown. The symbol of everything he'd lost and fought to reclaim. You face the world exactly as you made others face it, he said quietly. Stripped of power, stripped of protection, just you and the consequences of what you chose. For the first time, fear touched her eyes, because death was quick. Living with being known, with being seen for what you truly were, that lasted forever. Guards, Kaelor called. Loyalists entered, men who'd waited for this moment. Remove her, he said. Strip the title. Scatter her holdings. Let it be known that Seraphine Vale betrayed her king and will spend the rest of her days as exactly what she chose to be. Nothing. They took her. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just walked away with her back straight and her face empty. And Kaelor felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just tired recognition that this chapter had closed. He turned to find Elira watching him. It's done, he said. She nodded. Is it everything you thought it would be? No. What's missing? He looked around the throne room, at the blood, at the bodies, at the crown in his hands. I thought I'd feel victorious, or vindicated, or something. He set the crown on the throne. Mostly, I just feel exhausted. That's because you're human. Humans don't usually retake kingdoms through force. No, but they remember the cost. She touched his face. Don't forget that. Don't let the crown make you forget what it took to get here. This is the moment that defines what comes next. When victory is won, and the question becomes what you do with it. Do you become what you fought against? Or do you remember why you fought in the first place? Kaelor pulled Illyra close, held her while the throne room echoed with silence, and made a choice. I won't forget, he said. I promise. Outside, the city still burned. But inside this room, inside this moment, Kaelor Draven remembered what it felt like to be more than just a king. To be a man who'd learned that power without love was just another cage, and he'd already drowned once. He wasn't going back in. The throne room emptied slowly. Guards carried out bodies. Servants cleaned blood from marble floors. The work of restoring order after chaos always took longer than the chaos itself. Kaelor stood at the window watching dawn break over Vareth. The city still smoldered. Smoke rose from a dozen districts. But the fighting had stopped. Victory tasted like ash. He'd won. Reclaimed his throne, removed the traitors who'd tried to erase him. So why did it feel hollow? Illyra approached from behind, her footsteps soft on stone. You should rest, she said. Can't. Too much to do. The Empire won't collapse if you sleep for a few hours. It might? He turned to face her. Malrek left it rotting, every system breaking down. Border raids, food shortages, corruption in every office. Then delegate. You have people for this. Do I? His voice carried an edge. Half my court's dead or exiled. The ones who remain I can't trust yet. And the people. He stopped, looked back at the city. They saw their king get thrown in a river, saw the empire change hands 3 times in as many months. Why should they believe this is any different? This is the curse of power reclaimed through force. You can take a throne with swords and fire, but keeping it requires something harder, trust, and trust is built in inches, lost in miles. Illyra touched his arm. You're not alone in this. Aren't I? No, you have Torin, the clan chiefs, me. For how long? The question hung between them, because she'd followed him into war. But war was temporary. Kingship was forever, and forever was a long time to ask someone who'd never wanted this life. Before she could answer, Torin entered, bloodied, exhausted, but moving with purpose. We have a problem, he said. Of course they did. What kind? Kaelor asked. The kind with an army attached. Torin crossed to the war table, unrolled a map. Eastern border. Reports came in an hour ago. Duke Varian's marshalling forces. Kaelor's blood went cold. Varian, how many? 4,000. Maybe more. That's his entire territory. I know. Duke Varian Ashfeld controlled the eastern provinces. Rich farmland, strategic ports. He'd sworn loyalty to Kaelor's father, had renewed that oath when Kaelor took the throne. But oaths were cheap when power shifted. What's his demand? Kaelor asked. Recognition, autonomy, a seat on the High Council. Torin's jaw tightened. And marriage to you. Illyra's head snapped up. What? He has a daughter, Lady Morgana, 23, unmarried. Torin looked uncomfortable. Varian wants a royal marriage to legitimize his position. The room went silent. Kaelor felt Illyra's eyes on him, felt the weight of what this meant. Political marriages were currency, always had been. His father had used them to unite provinces, his grandfather before him. It was how empires stayed empires. But it also meant, no, Illyra said quietly. Illyra, no. Her voice harder now. You just fought a war to take back your throne. You don't get to turn around and sell yourself to the highest bidder. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Kaelor looked at Torin. How much time do we have? Varian wants an answer in 3 days, or he marches on the capital. He's bluffing. Maybe. But we just bled taking Vareth. The army's exhausted, supplies low, morale fragile. Torin's expression was grim. We can't fight another war, not now. This is the trap that catches every ruler. You win the throne thinking the hard part's over. Then you realize the throne itself is just another battlefield. Different weapons, same stakes. I need to think, Kaelor said. You have 3 days. I know. Torin left. The silence that followed felt like drowning. Illyra stood perfectly still, face unreadable. Say something, Kaelor said. What do you want me to say? Anything. Yell at me. Tell me I'm an idiot. Just talk to me. Fine. She turned to face him fully. Are you considering it? I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Her eyes flashed. 3 months ago, you were chopping firewood in my cottage, making tea, being human. Now you're back on your throne and the first thing you're thinking about is a political marriage? I'm thinking about keeping 4,000 soldiers from burning what's left of this empire. By selling yourself? By being pragmatic. Pragmatic? She laughed, bitter. Is that what we're calling it? Elira? Don't. She held up a hand. Don't stand there and tell me this is about pragmatism. This is about you remembering what it felt like to be king and forgetting what it felt like to be a man. The words hit like a blade. Because she was right, he could feel it happening, the old patterns reasserting themselves, the distance, the calculation, the cold math of power, everything he'd promised not to become. I won't let this empire fall apart, he said, even if it cost you everything that made taking it back worth it, if that's what it takes. She looked at him for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? He asked. Away, before I say something we'll both regret. Elira, wait. She stopped, didn't turn around. You promised, she said quietly. You promised you'd stay human, even when the crown tried to make you something else. I'm trying. No, you're choosing, and right now you're choosing wrong. She left. The door closed behind her with a sound like finality. Kaelor stood alone in the throne room that had cost him everything to reclaim, and wondered if winning was supposed to feel this much like losing. The next 2 days passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. Kaelor threw himself into rebuilding, appointments, supply chains, justice for those who'd suffered under Malrek's rule, anything to avoid thinking about Varian's ultimatum, about the choice that was no choice at all. Elira kept her distance, stayed in the guest quarters, helped with the injured but didn't seek him out. Her absence felt like a wound that wouldn't close. On the morning of the third day, Torin found him in the war room. Varian's envoy is here, the captain said. Already? He didn't wait for the deadline, showed up at dawn with 50 armed men. Trying to intimidate us. Working, too. The court's nervous. Kaelor straightened. Bring him to the throne room. Full court attendance. I want everyone to see this. What are you going to tell him? I don't know yet. That's comforting. Give me 10 minutes, then bring him in. Torin left. Kaelor stood alone among maps and battle plans. The smart move was obvious. Accept Varian's terms, secure the eastern provinces, buy time to consolidate power. It was what his father would have done, what any good king would do. But it also meant breaking the only promise that mattered, the one he'd made to Elira, to himself, to the man who'd climbed out of that river. He looked down at his father's ring, the weight of 7 generations pressing against his finger. This is the moment every leader faces eventually, when the right political choice and the right human choice pull in opposite directions, and you have to decide which kind of person you're going to be. Kaelor made his decision. He walked to the throne room. The court had assembled, nobles, merchants, military officers, all watching, waiting to see how their returned king would handle his first real test. Kaelor took his seat on the Blackstone throne. The doors opened. Lord Varian Ashfeld entered like he owned the place, tall, silver-haired, expensively dressed, the kind of man who'd spent 50 years accumulating power and knew exactly how to wield it. His daughter walked beside him. Lady Morgana was beautiful, poised, everything a royal bride should be. She looked at Kaelor with eyes that calculated his worth down to the last detail. Varian stopped at the appropriate distance, bowed, barely. Your Majesty, he said, thank you for receiving us. You didn't give me much choice. Showing up with an army tends to demand attention. Insurance. These are dangerous times. They are, which is why I'm curious what brings the Duke of the Eastern Provinces to my capital with 4,000 soldiers. Varian smiled. I think you know. Humor me. Very well. I come with an offer. My loyalty. My armies. My daughter. He gestured to Morgana. In exchange for recognition, autonomy, and a royal marriage that binds our houses. The court murmured, this was the moment. The decision that would shape everything that followed. Kaelor looked at Morgana. "What do you think of this arrangement, Lady Morgana?" She seemed surprised to be asked. "I serve my family's interests, Your Majesty." "That's not what I asked." A flicker of something crossed her face. Irritation, maybe, or respect. "I think it's good strategy," she said. "You need allies. We need status. Marriage solves both problems." "And love?" "Love is for peasants and poets. We're neither. Honest, at least." Kaelor turned his attention back to Varian. "And if I refuse?" "Then the eastern provinces become independent. We close our ports, stop grain shipments, and you try to hold an empire with a bleeding treasury and a starving capital. That's treason. That's negotiation." The room went dead silent. This was it. The edge of the blade, accept or fight. Build power through compromise or principle through defiance. Kaelor stood, every eye locked on him. "Duke Varian," he said clearly, "I appreciate your offer. Your daughter is lovely, your army is impressive, your leverage considerable. Then we have an accord?" "No." The word dropped like a stone into still water. Varian's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "No?" he repeated. "I didn't crawl out of a river and fight a war to take back my throne just to sell it to the highest bidder." Kaelor's voice carried through the hall. "This empire isn't a commodity. The crown isn't a bargaining chip, and I won't dishonor the people who died taking back this city by treating kingship like a merchant's transaction." "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Varian's mask cracked. Anger bled through. "You think you can stand alone? You think pride will feed your people when my grain stops flowing? I think a king who compromises his values for convenience becomes the kind of king who gets thrown in rivers." Kaelor stepped forward. "You want to withdraw your loyalty? Do it. March your army back east. Close your ports. Stop your shipments." He descended the throne platform, walked until he stood directly in front of Varian. "But understand this. The moment you act against this empire, you become my enemy. And I've gotten very good at dealing with enemies." The threat hung in the air. Varian's hand drifted toward his sword. 50 armed men in the hall tensed. Then Morgana touched her father's arm. "Papa, not here." Varian looked at his daughter. Something passed between them. He stepped back. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "I regret a lot of things. This won't be one of them." Varian turned, started toward the door, then stopped, looked back. "Tell me, Your Majesty, was she worth it?" "Who?" "The healer girl, the one you brought back from the river." Varian smiled, cold. "Everyone knows the story. The dead king saved by a peasant. Very romantic, very foolish." Kaelor's blood went ice. "Careful how you speak about her." "Or what? You'll threaten me again?" Varian laughed. "You chose her over an empire. I hope she's grateful." He left. The doors closed. The court exploded into whispers. Kaelor stood perfectly still, mind racing. He'd just made an enemy of the richest province, cut off food supplies, guaranteed another conflict, all for what? Love? Principle? The belief that some things mattered more than cold calculation? Torin appeared beside him. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Which do you think? Ask me after we survive the next month." Kaelor looked around the throne room, at the nobles watching him, judging him, wondering if their returned king was strong or just stubborn. "Dismiss the court," he said. "I need to think." "What about Varian?" "Let him go. We'll deal with the consequences when they come." Torin nodded and started clearing the room. Kaelor walked to the window. Outside, the city continued its slow recovery. People in the streets, markets reopening, life returning. But for how long? How long before Varian made good on his threat? How long before food shortages turned desperate people against their king? How long before choosing love over power became the mistake that destroyed everything? He didn't have answers, just the cold certainty that he'd crossed a line, and there was no going back set. Elira found him that evening in the royal gardens. He stood among dead roses. Winter had killed most of them. Spring would bring new growth, if they survived that long. She approached slowly. "I heard what happened. News travels fast. It does when you tell one of the most powerful dukes in the Empire to go to hell. I didn't tell him that. Close enough. She stopped a few feet away. Why? Why what? Why did you refuse him? You had a way out. A way to secure the eastern provinces without more bloodshed. Kaelor turned to face her. Because I made you a promise. That's not a good enough reason to risk an empire. Isn't it? She looked at him, really looked, searching for something. What are you trying to prove? She asked. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair. I just know that if I'd accepted Varian's offer, I would have become exactly what I was before. The king who ruled from distance, who made smart political choices and forgot what they cost. And now? Now I'm probably going to lose everything anyway, but at least I'll lose it on my terms. Elira shook her head. You're an idiot. I know, a stubborn, reckless idiot who just made enemies of people we can't afford to fight. I know that too. She stepped closer. And somehow, that makes me want to stay. His breath caught. Stay? I was ready to leave, pack my things, and go back to what was left of my cottage. Her voice softened. But then you went and did the stupidest, most human thing possible. You chose principle over power. That doesn't solve our problems. No, but it reminds me why I pulled you out of that river in the first place. She kissed him. Soft. Sure. The kiss of someone who'd made a choice and meant it. When she pulled back, her eyes were steady. We'll figure this out, she said. Together. Kaelor wanted to believe her, wanted to think that love and principle and staying human would be enough. But he'd been king long enough to know better. The world didn't reward virtue. It rewarded strength. And he'd just shown weakness to everyone watching. Still, for this moment, in this garden, with this woman, he let himself believe, let himself hope, let himself be more than just a king calculating odds. They stood together as darkness fell over Vareth. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight he'd chosen right, even if the world punished him for it. The consequences came faster than expected. 3 days later, Torin burst into the war room where Kaelor was meeting with advisors. We have a situation, the captain said. His face was pale, hands shaking slightly. That alone told Kaelor this was bad. What kind of situation? He asked. The border clans. They're leaving. Silence. Then chaos. Advisors erupted. Questions. Accusations. Panic. Kaelor held up a hand. Everyone out. Now. The room cleared, leaving only Torin and Elira, who'd been sitting in the corner reviewing supply lists. Explain, Kaelor said. Torin took a breath. Chief Aldrich sent word. The clans are withdrawing, returning to the mountains. Why? Because Varian contacted them, offered triple what they're getting from us to stay neutral in what comes next. Kaelor's mind raced. What comes next? War. Varian's not just closing the eastern provinces, he's raising allies. The Duke of Southport signed on. The Marquess of Greystone. Half the southern lords. That's impossible. I just refused him 3 days ago. He's been planning this for weeks. Maybe longer. Torin's expression was grim. The marriage offer was never the real play. It was a test, to see if you'd compromise. When you didn't, he activated his backup plan. This is what happens when you fight tacticians with principles. They make you think you won, then pull the rug out when you're not looking. Kaelor slammed his fist on the table. The clan swore blood oaths. Oaths can be bought, especially when the alternative is watching their people starve. Torin's voice dropped. Varian's also blockading the mountain passes, cutting off their trade routes. He gave them a choice. Take his gold and stay neutral, or side with us and watch their families suffer. And Aldrich agreed? He didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when you're responsible for 3,000 lives. The words hit like a punch. Because Torin was right. Aldrich had made the smart call, the one that protected his people. The same call Kaelor should have made when Varian offered terms. Elira spoke from the corner. How many troops do we have? In the capital, maybe 1,500 combat ready. Torin consulted notes. Another 1,000 scattered in nearby provinces. And Varian? 6,000, plus whatever the southern lords bring. Could be 10,000 by the time they march. We're outnumbered 4-1, at least. Silence settled like a shroud. Kaelor looked at the map spread across the table. At Vareth, in the center. At the eastern provinces closing like a fist. At the empire he'd bled to reclaim slipping through his fingers. When do they march? He asked. 2 weeks, maybe less if they move fast. Can we evacuate the city? Where would they go? Varian controls the eastern routes, the south's with him. North is mountains with hostile clans. West then. Western provinces are loyal but poor. Can't support a refugee population. So we're trapped. Yes. This is the endgame that catches every idealist. The moment when principle collides with reality and reality wins. When you realize that doing the right thing doesn't guarantee victory. Sometimes it just guarantees you die with a clear conscience. Kaelor looked at Alira. You should leave. What? You and anyone who wants to go. I'll arrange safe passage west. Get you away from here before… No. Alira, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You're the one talking about surrender. I'm talking about saving lives. By giving up. By being realistic. His voice rose. I made a choice. A stupid, idealistic choice. And now people are going to die for it. People die in wars. That's not new. It is when they're dying for nothing. The words hung between them. Alira stood, crossed to him, slapped him hard across the face. The sound cracked through the room. Kaelor's head snapped to the side, cheek burning. Don't you dare, she said quietly. Don't you dare dishonor everyone who fought beside you by calling it nothing. Alira, you think choosing principle over power was stupid? You think staying human instead of becoming a political machine was a mistake? Her eyes blazed. Then you learn nothing. Nothing from the river. Nothing from the cottage. Nothing from any of it. What would you have me do? Fight a war I can't win? Get everyone killed for pride? I'd have you remember who you are. She grabbed his collar. You're not the king who got thrown in a river because he was distant and blind. You're the man who climbed back out because people believed you were worth saving. And look where that got us. It got us here, together, fighting for something real instead of something convenient. She released him. If you want to surrender, fine. Do it. But don't pretend it's for anyone but yourself. She turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Kaelor asked. To help prepare defenses. Someone needs to remember we're worth fighting for. She left. Torrin looked at Kaelor. She's right, you know. About what? All of it. The captain moved to the window. I've served 3 generations of Draven kings, watched good men make hard choices, seen what compromise does to the soul. He turned. Your father would have married that girl, secured the alliance, kept the empire stable. Torrin's eyes were steady, and he would have died a little inside doing it, just like he died a little with every political marriage and calculated betrayal and cold decision. So what's the alternative? Die with principles intact? Maybe. Or maybe you find a third option. What third option? We're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, out of time. Then we change the game. How? Torrin smiled. Dangerous. We stop trying to win their way. Start playing ours. The plan came together over the next week. Not a plan for victory. Victory wasn't possible. But a plan for survival. For resistance. For making Varian's conquest so bloody and expensive that even winning would feel like losing. They evacuated civilians through western routes. Old, dangerous, but passable. Torrin organized the defense. Every street, every building. The kind of urban warfare that turned cities into meat grinders. And Kaelor did something unexpected. He opened the throne room to the people. Every day. Anyone could enter, speak, question him directly. At first they came hesitant, scared, but slowly the truth emerged. They'd heard about Varian's offer, about the marriage refused, about the choice their king had made. Some were angry, called him foolish, said he doomed them. Others understood. Saw a ruler who'd chosen principle over convenience, who'd remembered he was human before he was king. And slowly, painfully slowly, belief started to rebuild. Not in victory, in something harder, worth. The belief that some things mattered more than survival. that dying free was better than living as pawns in someone else's game. Alira worked beside him through all of it, organizing, encouraging, reminding people what they were fighting for. One evening, after a particularly brutal day of preparation, she found him in the gardens again. The roses were still dead, spring still distant, but something had changed. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you finally stopped carrying everything alone." He pulled her close. "I had help remembering I didn't have to." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Kaelor spoke quietly. "When Varian comes, when this goes bad, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "That you'll run, that you won't stay and die with me just because you believe I'm worth it." "I can't promise that." "Alira." "No." She looked up at him. "You don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide what I'm willing to die for. I'm trying to protect you." "I know, and I love you for it." Her voice softened. "But I didn't pull you from a river just to abandon you when things got hard. I didn't choose this just to run when it mattered most. You could die. So could you. So could everyone. That's not a reason to stop fighting." He kissed her then, deep, desperate. The kiss of someone who knew time was running out. When they broke apart, his voice was rough. "I love you. I know. If we survive this, when we survive this, I'm going to marry you, properly, with witnesses and ceremony and everything you deserve." She smiled. "Is that a proposal?" "It's a promise." "Good. I'll hold you to it." They turned back toward the palace, toward the war that was coming, toward the fight they couldn't win but couldn't surrender. And for the first time since Blackwater Gorge, Kaelor felt something besides fear or rage or cold determination. Peace. Not because victory was certain, because he'd finally become the kind of man worth fighting beside. Win or lose. Live or die. He'd chosen right. And that was enough. Varian's army appeared on the horizon 12 days later, 10,000 strong, banners snapping, steel gleaming. They surrounded Vareth like a noose tightening. Kaelor stood on the walls watching them assemble, Torin beside him, Alira on his other side. "Last chance to run," the captain said. "You running?" Kaelor asked. "Hell no." "Then neither am I." A rider approached under peace banner. They received him at the main gate, young, professional, carrying a sealed message. Kaelor broke the wax. "Read." His expression didn't change. "What does it say?" Alira asked. He handed her the letter. She read aloud. "King Kaelor, your defiance has consequences. Surrender now. Abdicate. Accept exile. Your people will be spared. Refuse, and every death that follows is on your hands. You have until dawn. Choose wisely. Duke Varian Ashfeld." Torin spat. "Arrogant bastard." "He's not wrong, though," Kaelor said quietly. "Every death will be on my hands." "No," Alira said firmly. "Every death is on his. He brought the army. He demanded surrender. He chose violence. I could stop it. One word and this ends." "It doesn't end. It just changes who's in charge." She gripped his arm. "Don't you dare give up now. Not after everything." Kaelor looked at her, at Torin, at the city behind them, at the empire he'd fought so hard to reclaim, and made his final choice. He turned to the messenger. "Tell Varian I have his answer." "What should I tell him, Your Majesty?" Kaelor's voice carried across the walls. "Tell him the Alpha King doesn't kneel, not to rivers, not to traitors, and not to dukes who mistake temporary power for permanent authority." The messenger paled. "That's your answer?" "That's my answer. Now get out before I send you back in pieces." The messenger fled. Kaelor turned to his commanders. "Sound the alarm. Man the walls. Prepare for siege." Orders rippled through the garrison. Torin gripped his shoulder. "For what it's worth, I'm proud to die beside you. Let's try not dying first." "Where's the fun in that?" Despite everything, Kaelor smiled. Then the first catapult fired. Stone arced through gray sky. Smashed into the outer wall with a sound like the world breaking, the siege of Vareth had begun. And this time, there would be no river to save him, no cottage to hide in, no escape. Just a king, an empire, and the consequences of choosing principle over power. Kaelor drew his sword. "For Vareth," he said. Around him voices rose. "For Vareth! For the king! For those worth dying beside!" The words rolled across battlements like thunder, and as the enemy army advanced, as fire began to rain down on the city, as the final battle for Vareth's soul erupted into chaos, Kaelor Draven stood tall, not because he knew they'd win, but because he'd finally learned what victory actually meant. It wasn't about thrones or crowns or power. It was about looking in the mirror and recognizing the man staring back. And for the first time in years, through all the blood and loss and impossible choices, he did. The first stone struck the outer wall at dawn. Impact shook the battlements beneath Kaelor's feet. Dust and fragments exploded outward. Men stumbled, grabbed rails, steadied themselves. Then the second stone hit, and the third. Varian siege engines launched in rhythm. Mechanical, relentless. Each impact a promise that walls were temporary and flesh was fragile. Kaelor watched from the central tower as his empire came under assault. 10,000 soldiers surrounded Vareth like a cancer spreading. Siege towers rolled forward on massive wheels. Battering rams swung from reinforced frames. Archers massed behind protective barriers. Professional, organized, overwhelming. Torrin appeared beside him. Blood already streaked his armor from a ricochet injury. East walls holding, south gates reinforced, north tower reports ready. West? Weakest point. Varian knows it. He's concentrating fire there. How long can we hold? Days if we're lucky, hours if we're not. This is the mathematics of siege warfare. Numbers don't lie. Walls fall. Supplies run out. Men break. The only question is when. Kaelor looked at the city spreading below. Smoke already rising from the outer districts. People evacuating toward the inner walls. Families carrying children and whatever possessions they could grab. Every face a reminder of what failure cost. "We need a miracle," he said quietly. "Fresh out of those," Torrin replied. "Have plenty of swords, though." "Swords won't stop catapults." "No, but they'll make the bastards bleed when they breach." When, not if. Even Torrin had stopped pretending victory was possible. A runner approached. Young, terrified, barely old enough to hold a spear. "Your Majesty, message from Duke Varian." Kaelor took the sealed letter, broke the wax, read. His expression went cold. "What does it say?" Torrin asked. Kaelor handed it over. The captain read, then cursed viciously. "He wants to negotiate? He wants to gloat." Kaelor's jaw tightened. Offering one more chance to surrender. Same terms, abdication, exile, mercy for the city. And if you refuse? Then he burns Vareth to ash and builds his empire on the ruins. You believe him? About burning the city? Yes, about mercy. Kaelor looked at the advancing army. Men who lay siege to their own empire don't understand mercy. Torrin folded the letter. What do you want to do? Meet with him. Buy time. See if there's an opening we can exploit. That's optimistic. That's desperate. There's a difference. The captain studied him for a moment. You know this is probably a trap. Of course it's a trap. Everything's a trap when you're losing. Kaelor turned from the wall. But if there's even a chance to save lives, I have to take it. And if he just wants you dead, then you make sure Elira gets out. Promise me. Torrin's expression hardened. Don't ask me to choose between my king and my duty. I'm not. I'm asking you to choose between revenge and survival. Kaelor gripped his shoulder. If I die, the city surrenders. You evacuate whoever you can. Live to fight another day. That's an order. They stared at each other. Finally, Torrin nodded. Once. Sharp. Understood. Good. Send word to Varian. I'll meet him at noon. Neutral ground outside the south gate. You're really doing this? I am. You're an idiot. So I've been told. Torrin left to make arrangements. Kaelor stood alone on the tower watching his empire burn, and wondered if courage and stupidity were really that different. God. Elira found him in the armory. He was checking weapons, testing blades, preparing for a meeting that might be his last. She stopped in the doorway, watched him work. You're going to meet Varian, she said. Not a question. News travels fast. It does when the king plans to walk into obvious danger. He set down the sword he'd been examining. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when the alternative is watching the city burn. She crossed to him. And if he kills you? Then I die knowing I tried everything. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Elira grabbed his armor, forced him to look at her. Don't do this. Don't throw your life away on some noble gesture that won't change anything. It might. It won't. Varian doesn't want negotiation. He wants your head on a pike. Maybe. But if there's even a chance... There isn't, her voice cracked. I know you want to believe one more sacrifice will fix this, but it won't. All it does is leave me alone in a burning city. The raw pain in her words hit harder than any blade. Kaelor pulled her close. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't help. I know. They stood like that for a long moment. Finally, Elira pulled back. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. If you're doing this, I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You don't get to decide that. The hell I don't. I'm the king. And I'm the woman who pulled you from a river when every instinct said to leave you. She grabbed his face. You don't get to protect me by leaving me behind. Not now. Not ever. Elira, no, you want to walk into danger? Fine. But you do it with me beside you, because that's what love means, standing together even when it's stupid. This is the thing about love. It doesn't make you safe. It makes you vulnerable in ways power never could. Because suddenly there's something worse than dying. Watching someone you love die instead. Kaelor looked at her. At the determination in her eyes, the stubborn refusal to be protected, and knew he'd already lost this argument. All right, he said quietly. Together. Together. They armed themselves in silence. His father's sword, her healer's blade, armor that would stop some weapons, but not all. When they were ready, Torin met them at the gate with 20 hand-picked guards. This is a terrible idea, the captain said. You mentioned that. Worth mentioning again? Noted. The gates opened. They rode out into no man's land, the space between walls and siege lines, where both armies could watch but neither could interfere. Supposedly. Varian waited with 50 soldiers. More than agreed, less than a full assault. Exactly the kind of intimidation tactic Kaelor expected. The Duke sat on a magnificent warhorse, armor polished, banners snapping, every inch the conquering lord. Morgana sat beside him, silent, watchful. Kaelor reined in 20 feet away. You wanted to talk, so talk. Varian smiled. Straight to business, no pleasantries. That's what I always appreciated about you, Kaelor. No pretense. I'm not here for appreciation. No, you're here because you're desperate. Varian's eyes swept over the walls behind them. How long can you hold? 2 days? 3? Long enough? For what? To die with honor? To make a stand? The Duke laughed. Honor doesn't feed starving people. Stands don't rebuild burned cities. Neither does conquest. But power does. Power and stability, which is what I'm offering. At the cost of everything this empire stands for. This empire stands for survival. It always has. Your father understood that. His father before him. Varian leaned forward in his saddle. They made hard choices. Compromised when necessary. Adapted. They never sold the crown. Didn't they? Every political marriage, every territorial concession, every treaty signed under duress. Varian's voice hardened. Your family built this empire on compromise. You're just too proud to admit it. The words cut because they carried truth. Every king compromised, bent, made deals they hated. That was how power worked. But there was a line between compromise and surrender, between adapting and losing yourself completely. What do you want, Varian? Kaelor asked. I want what I've always wanted. Recognition, a seat at the table, the respect my territory deserves. And my throne. If that's what it takes, it's not. Then we're at an impasse. Silence stretched between them. Around them, armies watched, waiting, hoping for peace or preparing for war. Alira spoke for the first time. What about the people? Varian's attention shifted to her. Ah, the healer girl. The reason we're all here. The people, she repeated. The ones dying while you play politics. What about them? They'll be fine. Once Kaelor accepts reality. Reality? Alira's voice carried across the gap. The reality where you burn their homes, starve their children, all because one man wouldn't sell himself? That's exactly what this is. You're holding an empire hostage because your ego got bruised. Varian's expression went cold. Careful, girl. You're only alive because of sentiment. And you're only powerful because of fear. She urged her horse forward, ignoring Kaelor's warning hand. But fear breaks eventually, and when it does, people remember who hurt them. Is that a threat? It's a prophecy. Morgana laughed. Sharp, unexpected. Everyone turned. She sat straighter in her saddle. She's right, father. Everything she said. Morgana, no, I'm tired of pretending. She looked at Kaelor. He's been planning this for months. The marriage offer was theater. He knew you'd refuse, wanted you to refuse. Why? Kaelor asked. Because refusing made you look weak to the nobles, made it easier to rally them against you. She smiled bitterly. Everything you've done, choosing love over power, standing on principle, he's used it to paint you as unfit to rule. Varian's hand went to his sword. That's enough. It's not nearly enough. Morgana turned to her father. I've watched you manipulate and scheme for years. Watched you turn politics into poison, and I'm done. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She dismounted, walked across no man's land, toward Kaelor. Varian shouted, Morgana, get back here. She ignored him, stopped in front of Kaelor's horse, looked up. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for my part in this, for not speaking sooner. Why speak now? Because I'm tired of being a pawn, and because, she glanced back at her father, because he's not going to stop. Not with negotiations, not with compromises. He wants your throne, and he'll burn the world to get it. I already knew that. But you don't know about the reinforcements. Kaelor's blood went cold. What reinforcements? 3,000 more soldiers, 2 days behind the main force. They're bringing siege towers. Greek fire, weapons designed to break cities. Her voice dropped. He's not planning to take Vareth, he's planning to erase it. Silence. Then chaos. Varian drew his sword. Seize her! His guards surged forward. Kaelor's instincts took over. He spurred his horse, grabbed Morgana, hauled her up behind him, turned and ran. Arrows filled the air. Steel sang. Men screamed. The parley dissolved into violence. Torrhen's guards formed a shield wall, covering the retreat, buying seconds with blood. Kaelor rode hard for the gates, Morgana clinging to his back, Alira beside him, death chasing them. They crashed through the gates as arrows hammered stone. Behind them, Varian's voice rose in fury. Kill them! Kill them all! The siege erupted into full assault. The throne room became a war council. Morgana stood in the center, muddy, shaking, but alive. Around her, commanders demanded answers. Who was she? Why should they trust her? What proof did she have? Kaelor held up a hand. Silence fell. Speak, he said to Morgana. Tell us everything. So she did. The reinforcements, the timeline. Varian's plan to not just conquer Vareth, but obliterate it as a message to anyone who might resist. Every detail another nail in their coffin. When she finished, Torrhen spoke first. If she's right, we have less than 48 hours before we're facing 13,000 soldiers with siege weapons we can't stop. Can we evacuate? Someone asked. Not everyone. Not in time. Then what? Kaelor looked at the map, at Vareth surrounded, at the impossible odds, and saw something everyone else missed. We don't defend, he said quietly. What? We don't defend. We attack. The room erupted, voices overlapping, accusations of madness. Kaelor let them vent, then raised his hand again. Listen, Varian expects us to turtle up, wait for reinforcements to arrive. Let him grind us down. So we give him the opposite, Torrhen said slowly. We hit him before he's ready. Exactly. That's suicide. So is waiting. Kaelor leaned over the map. Look, his forces are spread. Siege lines, supply camps, command tents, all vulnerable if we hit them fast. We don't have the numbers. We don't need numbers. We need surprise. His finger traced routes. 3 strike teams. Midnight. Hit the catapults. Burn the supplies. Kill the commanders. And then? Then we retreat. Force Varian to regroup. Buy time for evacuation. That's not a plan. That's desperation. It's all we have. This is what happens when strategy runs out. When the only moves left are the desperate ones. When you stop trying to win and start trying to hurt them enough that losing costs them everything too. Torin studied the map. Who leads the strike teams? I lead one. You lead another. Give the third to whoever you trust most. And the city defenses? Minimal crew. Everyone else fights. If this fails, we were dead anyway. At least this way we die making them bleed. Silence. Then Torin smiled. Grim. All right, let's make these bastards remember Vareth. Time. Midnight came with clouds covering the moon. Perfect for murder. Kaelor led 50 fighters through a drainage culvert beneath the walls. Old, narrow, built centuries ago when the city was smaller. They emerged a quarter-mile behind Varian siege lines, in enemy territory, surrounded by thousands of soldiers who'd kill them on sight. Kaelor looked at his team, saw fear, determination, the kind of desperate courage that came from knowing you were probably going to die. Remember the plan, he whispered. Fast, brutal, no mercy. We hit the catapults and retreat. And if we can't retreat, someone asked, then we make it count. They moved through darkness like ghosts, past sleeping camps, around guard posts, using terrain and shadow. The catapults stood silhouetted against fire-lit sky. Massive wooden structures, 30 feet tall, engines of destruction capable of breaking walls and killing dozens, 6 of them total, all clustered together. Guards patrolled, maybe 20. Alert, but not expecting attack from behind their own lines. Kaelor raised his hand. Signaled. His team spread out, waited, then struck. Steel flashed in darkness, throats opened, bodies dropped. The guards never had time to scream. Kaelor's fighters poured oil over the catapults, set torches, threw them. Fire climbed wood like hungry animals. Flames reached 30 feet in seconds, heat washing over them. Behind them, alarms started ringing. Move! Kaelor shouted. They ran, through the camp, over supply crates, past soldiers stumbling from tents. Chaos erupted, shouting, confusion. Someone spotted them. Intruders! South camp! Arrows started flying. Kaelor's team scattered. Some made it to the drainage culvert. Others got cut off. He saw a young fighter go down. Arrow through the leg. The kid screamed, tried to crawl. Kaelor doubled back, grabbed him, hauled him up. Leave me! The kid gasped. Shut up and run! They stumbled toward the culvert. Enemy soldiers closing in, not going to make it. Then Alira appeared from the shadows. She'd come with the strike team despite his orders, had her healer's blade out, face set. Go, she shouted. I've got your back. Alira, no, go! He ran, carrying the wounded fighter. Alira covering their retreat. Behind him, steel rang. She fought like someone possessed, buying seconds with every parry. They reached the culvert. Kaelor shoved the kid through, turned back. Alira was surrounded. 3 soldiers, all bigger, all armed. She was going to die. Kaelor charged back into the fight, blade singing, no technique, just raw fury. He cut through the first soldier before the man could react, parried the second's thrust, drove his sword through the third's gut. Blood sprayed, bodies fell. He grabbed Alira's hand. Run! They fled together, arrows hammering stone behind them, dove into the culvert, crawled through darkness and filth, emerged inside the city walls as fire lit the sky behind them, all 6 catapults burning, black smoke climbing toward stars. Torin was already back, his team successful. The 3rd strike force limped in minutes later. Half strength, but alive. They'd done it, delayed the siege, bought time, hurt Varian where it mattered, but the cost? Kaelor counted faces, saw who was missing. 23 went out. 16 came back, 7 dead, for 6 catapults and some burned supplies. Was it worth it? He looked at the city, at the people who might now have a chance to evacuate. Had to be worth it. Had to be. Because if it wasn't, then those 7 died for nothing, and he couldn't carry that weight. Elira grabbed his arm. "You're bleeding." He looked down, hadn't noticed the gash across his ribs, adrenaline wearing off, pain filtering through. "It's nothing. It's not nothing. Come on." She led him to the medical station, cleaned the wound, stitched it with quick efficiency. Her hands were steady, face calm, but he saw the tremor when she tied off the thread. "You almost died," he said. "So did you. I told you not to come. And I ignored you. Funny how that works." Elira, don't. She cut him off. "Don't tell me I shouldn't have been there. Don't say it was too dangerous. I made my choice." "What if you died? What if you had?" She looked at him. "Would you want me to regret standing beside you?" "No." "Then don't ask me to regret it either. This is the bargain love demands. You don't get to protect people from their own choices. You don't get to save them from consequences they're willing to face. All you can do is stand together and hope you're strong enough to survive what comes next." Kaelor pulled her close, ignored the pain in his ribs. "I love you," he said. "I know. If we die tomorrow, we're not dying tomorrow. But if we do, then we die together." She pressed her forehead to his. "And that's enough, Mom." Dawn came too fast. Varian's response was immediate and brutal. The remaining siege weapons launched in fury. Stone hammered walls without pause. Fire arrows set buildings burning. And in the distance, dust rose from marching feet. The reinforcements were early. They'd forced Varian to call them in ahead of schedule, but now they were here. 13,000 soldiers, fresh, armed, angry. Vareth's defenders numbered barely 1,500. The math was simple. They were going to lose. Kaelor stood on the walls watching death approach. Torrin appeared beside him. "Evacuation's nearly complete. Maybe 5,000 civilians got out. Rest are still in the city. How many can we save if we surrender? Depends on Varian's mood, might spare them, might make examples. Not good enough. It's all we've got." Kaelor looked at the approaching army, at the siege weapons, at the empire he'd fought so hard to reclaim slipping away, and realized something. He'd been fighting the wrong battle. All this time he'd been trying to win, to reclaim his throne, to restore what was lost. But thrones were just symbols. The real fight was never about power. It was about what you were willing to sacrifice to protect the people who believed in you. "Get everyone to the inner keep," he said. "Civilians, wounded, anyone who can't fight." "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to give them a target they can't ignore." "Kaelor, if Varian wants me dead, fine. Let him come get me. Let him commit everything to that goal. That's suicide. That's a distraction. While he's focused on killing me, you evacuate everyone else. There's nowhere to evacuate to. We're surrounded. Then you make somewhere. Underground tunnels. The river. I don't care. Just get them out." Torrin grabbed his shoulder. "I'm not leaving you to die alone." "You're not. Elira will stay." Kaelor's voice softened. "She won't leave. I know her. So you take everyone else. Give them a chance." "This is insane. This is what kings do. They die so their people can live. That's not what kings do. That's what martyrs do." "Maybe there's no difference." They stared at each other. Finally, Torrin nodded. "You're the bravest idiot I've ever met. I'll take it." The captain turned, started shouting orders. The evacuation began. Kaelor walked to the throne room, sat on his father's throne one last time. Elira found him there. "You're planning something stupid," she said. "How'd you know?" "Because I know you." She crossed to him. "What is it this time?" "A last stand, me against Varian's army, buy time for everyone else to escape." "That's not a plan. That's suicide." "It's all I have left." She looked at him for a long moment, then drew her blade. "Then I'm staying." "Elira, no. We've had this conversation. I'm done running. I'm done watching from the sidelines." Her eyes were steel. "You want to make a stand? Fine. But you don't do it alone. You could die. So could you. We've established this. This is different. This is us. She grabbed his hand. Together, like we promised. Win or lose. Live or die. Kaelor felt something break inside his chest. Not pain. Release. The burden he'd been carrying alone suddenly shared. All right, he said quietly. Together. They stood as one, walked to the main gates. Outside, Varian's army had reached the walls. 13,000 strong, siege towers rolling, battering rams swinging, the final assault beginning. Kaelor took a breath, looked at Elira. She nodded. Together they opened the gates and walked out to face an army. They walked through the gates like ghosts emerging from stone. Kaelor and Elira, side by side. No army behind them, no reinforcements waiting, just two people facing 13,000 soldiers with nothing but blades and the kind of desperate courage that came from having already lost everything. The morning sun broke through clouds, cast long shadows across the killing ground between city walls and siege lines. Varian's army stopped advancing. Confusion rippled through the ranks. Soldiers looked at each other. Officers shouted questions. This wasn't how sieges worked. Defenders didn't walk out to meet attackers. Kings didn't abandon walls for open ground. But Kaelor had stopped playing by rules written for men who feared death. And fear was expensive when you'd already drowned once. They stopped 50 feet from the nearest siege tower, close enough to see individual faces, far enough that archers would have to aim. Kaelor's voice carried across the sudden silence. Duke Varian Ashfeld. I'm here. The king you wanted dead. Come take what you think you're owed. For a long moment, nothing. Then the army parted. Varian rode forward on his warhorse, armor gleaming, surrounded by personal guard. He stopped 20 feet away, looked at them like they were insects that had wandered into his path. You're surrendering? He asked. No. Then what is this? A challenge. Kaelor's hand rested on his sword. You want my throne? My empire? You fight me for it. Here, now, just us. Varian laughed. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You're outnumbered 13,000 to 2. Then it should be easy. Kaelor's eyes were ice. Unless you're afraid. The words hung like a blade against Varian's throat. Around them, soldiers leaned forward, whispered. This was the kind of challenge that couldn't be ignored. Not without looking weak. And weakness in front of 13,000 men was political suicide. Varian's expression went cold. You think I'm stupid enough to risk everything on single combat? I think you're smart enough to recognize opportunity. Kaelor gestured to the walls. You can siege Vareth, lose thousands of soldiers breaking through, spend months rebuilding what you destroy, all while the western provinces watch and wonder if you're worth following. Or you fight me, win, and the city surrenders. My people accept your rule. You get your empire without the bloodshed. And if you win, then you withdraw, leave Vareth alone, find another kingdom to conquer. This is the thing about power. It's not just about having it. It's about being seen to have it. A king who hides behind armies looks weak. A king who fights his own battles becomes legend. Varian understood that calculation instantly, but he also understood the risk. What's to stop me from just killing you both right now? He asked. Nothing. Kaelor's voice was calm. Except that 13,000 soldiers are watching, and they'll remember a duke who murdered an unarmed king under parley. You're armed. We walked out here alone. That's as good as unarmed. Semantics. History. Which do you want to be? The man who won through strength, or the coward who needed an army to kill one wounded king? The challenge cut deep. Varian's jaw tightened. You're manipulating me. I'm offering you a choice, same as you offered me. Kaelor stepped forward. Fight me yourself. Prove you deserve what you're trying to take. Silence stretched. Then Varian dismounted, drew his sword. Fine. We do this the old way. He looked at his daughter among the assembled nobles. Morgana, bear witness. She nodded, face unreadable. Varian walked forward until he stood 10 feet from Kaelor. Any last words? The Duke asked. Just one question. What? Why? You had wealth, power, respect. Why risk it all for a throne? Varian smiled, bitter. Because respect without a crown is just being tolerated. I spent 50 years watching lesser men sit where I should have been, watching your family rule because of bloodline instead of capability. So this is about ego. This is about legacy, about being remembered as more than the Duke who served. His voice hardened. I'm tired of being the sword someone else swings. I want to be the hand that holds it. And you'll burn an empire for that? I'll build a better one from the ashes. Here was the truth stripped bare. Not politics or strategy or even ambition. Just the desperate hunger of a man who'd lived his whole life in someone else's shadow and couldn't stand it anymore. Kaelor understood that hunger, had felt it himself. The difference was what you were willing to sacrifice to feed it. Then let's finish this, he said. They circled each other. 2 men, 1 empire, an army watching. This was how kingdoms had been decided for thousands of years. Blood and steel, and the belief that the strongest deserved to rule. Varian attacked first. Fast. Precise. Decades of training behind every strike. Kaelor parried. Countered. Their blades sang. The fight was brutal. Technical. No wasted movement. Varian was good. Better than Malrek had been. Age hadn't slowed him. Experience made every strike count. But Kaelor had something Varian didn't. Nothing left to lose. He'd lost his throne, his empire, his certainty that power mattered. All he had left was the woman standing 20 feet away and the belief that some things were worth dying for. That made him dangerous. Their swords locked, face to face, close enough to smell blood and sweat. You can't win, Varian hissed. Don't need to win. Just need to hurt you enough that your army questions whether you're worth following. Kaelor broke the lock, spun. His blade cut across Varian's shoulder. First blood. The Duke staggered, recovered, rage replacing calculation. He charged. They crashed together, trading blows that would have killed lesser fighters. Around them, the army watched in silence. This was primal, ancient, the kind of combat that transcended politics. Kaelor's ribs screamed where he'd been wounded the night before. Exhaustion pulled at his muscles, but he pushed through. Every strike a promise, every parry a prayer. He would not break, would not fall. Not while Elira watched, not while his people depended on him, not while there was still breath in his body and steel in his hand. Varian was slowing, age catching up, wounds accumulating. Kaelor pressed the advantage, drove him back, step by step, toward the siege lines. Then Varian did something unexpected. He dropped his sword, stepped back. Enough. Kaelor stopped, blade raised. What? I said enough. Varian was breathing hard, blood running down his arm. You've made your point. The fight's not over. Yes, it is. The Duke looked at his army, at Morgana, at the city walls. I could kill you, eventually, but it would cost me everything I have left. That was always the price. I know, I just didn't want to admit it. Varian's voice was tired. You want to know the truth? I don't even want the throne anymore. I wanted to prove I could take it, that I was strong enough. And now? Now I'm just an old man bleeding in the dirt, fighting a war that will cost more than it's worth. He looked at Kaelor, really looked, seeing him for the first time as something other than an obstacle. You would have died here, Varian said quietly. You and that girl. Thrown away everything for principle. Yes. That's insane. That's love. Varian shook his head. I had that once, a long time ago. Traded it for power. Thought I was making the smart choice. Were you? Ask me when I'm dying alone in a castle full of people who fear me. He turned to his army, raised his voice. Stand down. Withdraw siege weapons. We're leaving. Shocked silence. Then an officer stepped forward. My lord, we have them surrounded. We can what? Kill a king who's willing to die for his people? Burn a city that will hate us forever? Varian's voice cut like a blade. I didn't come here to build an empire on corpses. I came to prove something, and I failed. He looked at Kaelor one more time. You were right. Some things cost more than they're worth. This is one of them. What will you do? Kaelor asked. Go home. Rule my provinces. Die knowing I was strong enough to walk away. A ghost of a smile. That's its own kind of victory. He turned, walked back to his horse. Morgana approached him, touched his arm. They spoke quietly. Then she turned and walked toward Kaelor instead. "I'm staying," she called to her father. Varian stopped. "What?" "I'm staying, to help rebuild, to be part of something that chooses principle over power." She looked at Kaelor. "If you'll have me." "Your father made his choice. I'm making mine." Varian looked like he wanted to argue, then just nodded once. "Be well, daughter." "You too, father." He rode away. His army followed, slow, uncertain, but moving. Within an hour, the siege lines were empty, the army gone. Vareth stood battered but unbroken, and Kaelor stood in the killing ground watching an empire choose mercy over conquest. Elira appeared beside him, took his hand. "We survived," she said quietly. "We did. What now?" He looked at the city, at the walls scarred by catapult fire, at the people emerging cautiously from hiding. "Now we rebuild." Rebuilding took longer than fighting. Walls needed repair, homes needed raising, trust needed earning. Kaelor spent the first month just talking to people, not commanding, not decreeing, listening. He walked through burned districts and heard stories of what they'd lost, sat in taverns and learned what they needed, met with merchants and farmers and soldiers, and learned what an empire looked like from the ground. It was humbling. For 15 years, he'd ruled from the throne, made decisions that affected thousands without seeing their faces. Now he saw everything. The mother who'd lost her home, the child who'd watched his father die defending the walls, the merchant whose business was ash. Every face a reminder of what power cost when wielded without wisdom. Elira worked beside him. Not as queen, she refused that title, said it came with expectations she didn't want, but as partner, as conscience, as the voice that reminded him to stay human when the crown tried to make him something else. They rebuilt her cottage first, not in the city, by the river where she'd pulled him from death. Bigger fireplace like she'd wanted, room for books, garden space. It became their refuge, the place they went when the palace felt too much like a cage. One evening, 6 months after the siege, they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the water gold. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Choosing this, choosing me, instead of taking the easy path." Kaelor looked at her, at the woman who'd saved him, who'd stood beside him through war and betrayal and impossible choices. Not for a second. Even knowing what it cost, especially knowing what it cost. He took her hand. "I spent 15 years being a king, being strong, being certain, and it made me blind. And now? Now I'm learning to see." She leaned against his shoulder. "What do you see?" "That power without love is just another prison. That strength without compassion becomes tyranny. That being king matters less than being human." Very philosophical. "I've had time to think. Too much time." "Probably." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Kaelor stood, walked inside, came back with something in his hand, a ring, simple gold, no jewels, no royal crest, just a promise made solid. He knelt. "Elira Solon, you pulled me from a river when I was dying, fed me when I was starving, stood beside me when armies came. You taught me what it meant to be human again." His voice roughened. "I know I'm a terrible bet. I'm a king with a broken empire and more enemies than friends. I'll probably make mistakes. I'll definitely be stubborn. And there's a good chance someone will try to throw me in another river." She laughed through tears. "But I love you, more than I've loved anything, more than the throne or the crown or any measure of power." He held out the ring. "Will you marry me? Not because it's politically smart, not because empires need heirs, just because I can't imagine a life without you in it." Elira looked at him, at the ring, at the cottage they'd built together. "You're right about one thing," she said. "What's that?" "You are a terrible bet." She pulled him up, kissed him. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Like everything else about them. Improbable, but right. They held each other as darkness fell and stars emerged. And for the first time since Blackwater Gorge, Kaelor felt complete. Not because he'd reclaimed his throne, because he'd found something worth more than power, worth more than empires, worth dying for, and living for in equal measure. Chuck. The wedding happened 3 months later, not in the throne room. Alara refused that too. They were married beside the river, where everything had started. Small ceremony, close friends, Torin as witness, Morgana among the guests, and thousands of people lining the banks, watching, celebrating, not because their king commanded it, because they chose to. That was the difference. The old Kaelor would have demanded attendance, made it ceremony and spectacle. The new Kaelor just invited people to share his joy, and they came anyway. The vows were simple, standard words about love and loyalty and standing together. But when Kaelor spoke them, he meant every syllable. This woman had saved him, not just from drowning, from becoming the kind of man who measured worth in power instead of character. When the ceremony ended, they walked through the crowd. People reached out, touched his hand, Alira's shoulder, offered congratulations. No guards, no barriers, just a king among his people. An old woman grabbed Kaelor's sleeve, her face weathered, eyes sharp. "You're different from your father," she said. "I know, I'm sorry if that's disappointing." "It's not," she smiled. "Your father was a good king, strong, fair, but distant. You're something else." "What's that?" "Human, and that's what we need, someone who remembers what it's like down here." She patted his hand. "Don't forget that. Don't let the throne make you forget." "I won't." "Good, because we'll remind you if you do." She walked away. Alara squeezed his hand. "You all right?" "Better than all right." He looked around at the celebration, at the empire slowly healing. "For the first time in years, I actually believe we can do this." "Do what?" "Build something that lasts. Not through fear or power, through trust." "That's a long game." "Good thing we're not going anywhere." They returned to the palace as sunset painted the sky red and gold. The throne room had been transformed, not for governance but celebration. Tables loaded with food, musicians playing, people dancing. Kaelor and Alira moved through the crowd. No crown tonight, no formal robes, just two people celebrating with friends. Torin found them near midnight, slightly drunk, grinning. "Hell of a day, Your Majesty." "Don't call me that." "Not tonight." "What should I call you?" "Kaelor. Just Kaelor." The captain raised his cup. "To Kaelor, the king who learned to be human." They drank. Later, much later, Kaelor stood on the palace balcony looking over Vareth. The city glowed below. Lanterns and torches, life and light. Still scarred, still broken in places, but healing. Alira joined him, wrapped in his cloak against the cold. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I lost everything once. Throne, empire, my sense of who I was." He pulled her close. "And somehow, that loss saved me." "How?" "Because it forced me to rebuild from nothing, to remember what actually mattered." He looked at her. "I would have been a terrible king if you hadn't pulled me from that river." "You were already a good king, just lost. Maybe, but I needed to lose everything to find what was worth keeping. This is the final truth every ruler must learn. Power is temporary. Empires fall, thrones crumble. But the choices you make while holding power, those echo forever. You can rule through fear and strength and watch men bow while they plot your death. Or you can rule through trust and compassion and build something that outlasts stone. The first makes you powerful, the second makes you remembered." Kaelor had spent 15 years being powerful. Now he was learning to be remembered, for the right reasons. "Come to bed," Alira said. "Tomorrow starts early." "What's tomorrow?" "Council meeting, grain distribution, border negotiations, the usual." "Sounds terrible." "It is," she smiled. "But we'll do it together." Together. They walked inside, left the balcony empty, the city quiet below. And as dawn approached over Vareth, a new day began. Not for an empire built on conquest, but for a kingdom learning to heal. Led by a king who'd drowned and climbed back out. Who'd learned that strength without love was just another cage. That power without compassion became poison. That being human mattered more than being feared. Kaelor Draven would never be the strongest king, never the most ruthless, never the one who inspired terror with a glance. But he would be the one who remembered that crowns were meant to serve the people wearing them, not the other way around. And in the end, that would be enough. More than enough. It would be everything. Years passed. The empire healed slowly. Villages rebuilt. Trade routes reopened. The border clans renewed their oaths. Not through force, through mutual respect. Kaelor ruled differently than his ancestors. He traveled constantly, visited provinces, met with common people, heard complaints directly instead of filtered through advisors. It exhausted him, frustrated the court, broke every tradition. But it worked. People trusted him because he trusted them first, showed vulnerability instead of strength, admitted mistakes instead of hiding them. And slowly, the empire transformed, not into something bigger or more powerful, into something sustainable. Alira worked beside him always, never took the title of queen, but everyone called her that anyway. She organized healers, built schools, created systems to help those the empire had forgotten. And when Kaelor got too caught up in politics, she reminded him what mattered: the people, the lives, the human cost of every decision. They had children eventually, 2 daughters, 1 son. Raised not in isolation but among other children. Taught that crowns were responsibility, not privilege. The oldest asked once why her father had scars across his back. Kaelor told her the truth, about Seraphine, about the river, about nearly dying and learning to live. She listened quietly, then asked the question that defined everything. "Are you angry at the people who hurt you?" "No." "Why not?" "Because anger is expensive, and I'd rather spend my energy building than destroying." "But don't you want revenge?" Kaelor looked at Alira, at their children, at the empire he'd built through compassion instead of conquest. "I got something better than revenge," he said. "I got to prove them wrong." The children grew, learned, became leaders in their own right. The empire continued. Not perfectly. Problems remained. Challenges emerged. But it endured. And when Kaelor was old and tired and ready to pass the crown to his daughter, he did so without regret. He'd built something that would outlast him, not through fear, through love. His final act as king was to abolish the practice of throwing criminals into Blackwater Gorge. The place that should have killed him instead became a memorial to second chances, to redemption, to the belief that people could change. He stood there one last time before abdicating, Alira beside him, both gray now, scarred by time. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't pulled you out?" she asked. "Every day. And I'm grateful I'll never know." He took her hand. "You gave me a second life. I hope I used it well." "You did." She squeezed his fingers. "You became the man I saw drowning in that river, the one worth saving. Was I that man then, or did I become him? Does it matter? No, I suppose it doesn't." They turned away from the gorge, walked back toward the cottage by the river, the same one they'd rebuilt together decades ago. Home. That night, lying in bed listening to water flow past their window, Kaelor spoke quietly. "I was thrown away once, left to die, and somehow that became the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." "How so?" Alira asked. Alira, "Because it forced me to rebuild myself from nothing, to choose who I wanted to be instead of accepting who I was told to be." His voice was peaceful. "I lost everything and found what actually mattered." "Which is?" "This, you, the life we built, the people we helped." He turned to face her. "Love over power, every time. That's the lesson. Took you long enough to learn it. Better late than never." She kissed him, soft, familiar. "Sleep, my king." "Just Kaelor." "Sleep, Kaelor." He closed his eyes. And for the first time since that rain-soaked night when Seraphine pushed him into darkness, Kaelor Draven slept without nightmares. No betrayals haunted him, no failures tormented him, just peace, the kind that came from living a life that mattered, from choosing right over easy. Human over powerful, love over fear. He had been a king, had ruled an empire, had won wars and lost everything and climbed back from death itself. But his greatest victory wasn't conquest or power or even survival. It was this: learning that the throne was just furniture, the crown just metal, and the only thing that actually mattered was how you treated people when the power was gone and all you had left was your character. Kaelor Draven had been thrown in a river to die. and instead he learned to live. That was the story, not of a fallen king reclaiming power, but of a broken man finding himself and choosing to be better than what the world had tried to make him.